The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., May 4th, 2026. I hereby appoint the Honorable Adrian Smith to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Holy God, our Creator and Redeemer, help us to hear your word with new ears. Long ago, you declared that you are the first and the last. Your hand laid the foundation of the earth, and your right hand spread out the heavens. The former things you declared long ago, the words that came from your mouth at creation, have come to pass. All that you desire for us and all you have done for us has been made known. Reveal to us now the hidden things we could not appreciate because your wisdom is too wonderful for us. Now more than ever, we need a word from you. Your guidance unveils your eternal and gracious design for our lives, and your direction clarifies the decisions before us. Speak, and we will listen. Lead us, and we will follow. In your sovereign name we pray. Amen.
Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the Journal of the Last Day's Proceedings is approved. The chair will lead the House in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to Clause 4 of Rule 1, the following enrolled bill was signed by the Speaker on Thursday, April 30th, 2026.
Senate 4465, to amend the FISA Amendments Act of 2008 to extend the authorities of Title VII of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 and for other purposes.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on May 1st, 2026 at 11:18 a.m. that the Senate passed Senate 272, Senate 874, Senate 1199, Senate 2232, Senate 2280, Senate 2934, Senate 2975, and Senate 4161. Signed sincerely, Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. on Thursday, May 7th.
All right, good morning, everybody. Today we are here to talk about our progress here at the Justice Department to hold meat packers accountable. As you all know, last November, the president tasked the department to investigate the costs and prices of beef. As a result, we prioritized investigating potential antitrust violations in U.S. cattle and beef markets. In the beef industry, the big four processors control over 85% of the beef processing market. Two of the big four are primarily foreign-owned. Multiple plant closures across the country, the current market structure, and high concentration in the industry indicate anti-competitive activity. Since the president's executive order, the department has been actively investigating with a review of over 3 million documents. Hundreds of industry participants, including ranchers, cattlemen, producers, and processors, have been contacted and many interviewed as part of this ongoing investigation. More broadly, the department has also executed on the president's executive order to stop anti-competitive behavior in the broader food supply market. Later this week, we will be announcing an historic settlement that will directly affect the prices of proteins like chicken, pork, and turkey. This business model allows competitors to exchange competitively sensitive information on every aspect of the protein industry and has raised the prices on chicken, raised the prices on pork, and raised the prices on turkey. The department is also working closely with Secretary Rollins and the Department of Agriculture. We've signed a memorandum of understanding that allows us to share information aimed at protecting competition in agricultural inputs like seeds and fertilizer. But there is more work to do, and we need your help. I want to remind everyone and anyone in the industry that if you have information about antitrust crimes, about price fixing, bid rigging, market allocation, or even procurement fraud, the Department of Justice wants to hear from you. Through our whistleblower rewards program, which is we do in partnership with the United States Postal Inspection Service, you can be financially rewarded for coming forward with information about this behavior. Just to put a fine point on it, if the information you provide helps us secure a criminal penalty in excess of $1 million, you can be entitled to recover and receive 15 to 30% of the money that we recover. So whether you're a farmer, a purchaser, a processor, you can help protect food security in America by reporting these types of violations and potentially criminal conduct. We will use every law enforcement tool available to help reduce food prices and vigorously enforce the antitrust laws to ensure every aspect of the agricultural industry competes on a fair playing field. Now I would like to to introduce our great Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Brooke Rollins.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and a very hearty and vigorous thank you to our acting Attorney General. He's only been on the job for, I think, a couple of weeks at this point, and the moment I called and asked for his time and his focus and his team's effort on this issue facing our country, without hesitation, Todd, you said we're all in at the Department of Justice. And so here we are today and just couldn't be more grateful. I've got a couple of larger comments to put this in context. Then I know my great partner, Director Peter Navarro from the White House, we've worked together a long time, has some thoughts. And then really the stars of the show are our ranchers who are here from Colorado, from Texas, from the West, from Idaho, and they'll have a couple of thoughts too. And then I think we'll take a couple questions at the end. Again, what an honor it is to be here alongside Attorney General Blanche. Thank you for your strong leadership. And of course, the incredible Peter Navarro, our Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, also joined by several members of the ranching community. Todd, Peter, and I each serve the American public in different capacities across the executive branch at the pleasure of our boss, President Donald Trump. But we are united by a single mission to protect our great American farmers and ranchers, the American way of life, and the American consumer. President Trump has been the greatest champion in American history for our farmers and ranchers, from record-breaking investments in rural America through the working families tax cuts to opening up the global market, now 18 new trade deals for our incredible American ag products, and to most recently implementing a plan to fortify the American beef industry. And these efforts couldn't be more timely for America's ranchers, who are seeing a historic low herd size. This morning, I'll talk a little bit about and summarize that herd size crisis facing our ranchers, but how the ongoing investigation into our Big Four packers, what that means for the larger policy context, and certainly what it means for national security. Let's begin with the herd size. As of January 1st of this year, we have about 86.2 million head of cattle and calves in America. That is the lowest since the 1950s, and this year we're looking to be slightly down again. In the past decade alone, we've lost over 17% of our cattle ranchers. More than 100,000 ranches across this country are no more. The low herd size inherited by the Trump administration can be attributed to a variety of factors. The biggest one, at least from our perspective, is the radical left's ongoing assault against ranching as a way of life. For years, they used climate alarmism to wage a war on cattle in America. And when you pair that with droughts, wildfire, overregulation from previous administrations, and volatile markets, this is how we have ended up here today. Growing the herd size is an immediate problem in need of solutions, and we've already begun implementing across the government and into the states how we're going to solve for that. And we'll talk more about that as we move through the week. But already on the grazing allotments, we've opened up millions of acres in the West. We unveiled our new product of the USA, which is catching like fire across the country in a good way, labeling meat and poultry and egg products as actually born, raised, harvested, and processed in America, which is a new rule. Expanding the grading pilot program to include 88 facilities in 32 states. That's smaller processors. Reducing holiday and overtime inspection fees for small processors. Of course, encouraging our child nutrition programs. You all have heard me say over and over, USDA spends $400 million every day on 16 nutrition programs, incentivizing those programs to purchase locally grown, processed, harvested beef. And then, of course, Bobby Kennedy and I, with our new dietary guidelines, underscoring the importance of meat, among other actions, in eating real food. So we are making big change to keep incentivizing the growth of our cattle herd and to get out of this current situation we're in. However, and this is the second part of what I want to talk about today, the consolidation in U.S. meatpacking has led to just 4 meat packers: JBS, a Brazilian-owned company; Cargill, Tyson Foods, and National Beef, another Brazilian company. Those 4 companies monopolize about 85% of the U.S. processing market today. But it hasn't always been that way. The rate of this 4-firm control has accelerated since the 1970s. According to USDA data, concentration for cattle slaughter of these 4 was only 25% in 1977 and jumped to 71% by 1992. As mentioned today, it is an astounding 85%. Notably, these 4 firms now own together more than 70 subsidiary companies today. They don't own them together, but in total, there are 70 subsidiary companies that are owned by these 4. This has led to a frightening landscape for cattle ranchers. Industry consolidation reduces options for our ranchers looking to sell their cattle. It weakens their negotiating power, and it risks reliance upon a single buyer. Today, the concentration of larger plants opens the door to tighter coordination by the Big Four with producers, and perhaps the exertion of control over them as well, given they have limited options to sell their cattle. As ranchers face fewer options for selling their animals, the Big Four grow stronger and stronger. These companies now have an unprecedented ability to wield market power and influence prices paid for cattle, definitely more so than if we had greater competition. On top of that, half of these meatpacking giants, including the largest meat packer in the world, are either foreign owned or have significant foreign ownership and control, making them a threat not just to our cattle producers, but a threat to America itself. And as time has gone on, it becomes more and more clear that food security is truly national security. One Brazilian owned company holds roughly a quarter of the market and has a documented history of international corruption and illicit activity. The brutal reality is that such foreign ownership of meat packers has been affiliated not just with corruption, but also cartels and, as recent as last week, slave labor, which is bad enough on its own, but it's also to the detriment of America's great independent ranchers and consumers. Further, when just four firms control a market, suppliers and food prices are rocked heavily when disruptions occur. The last few years have proven that the protein sector, especially, and therefore our food security, is especially at risk when global pandemics, animal disease outbreaks, and facility issues like fires, labor disputes, foodborne illnesses, and cybersecurity attacks occur. As an example, in 2019, a fire at a Tyson slaughter plant in Kansas resulted in a 27% drop in cattle traded on the market just that following week. And in 2021, a cyber attack on JBS plants in the US caused ripple effects and delayed production. President Trump is acutely aware of these challenges, as evidenced by his Truth Social directive last November, directing the Department of Justice to investigate the Big Four meatpackers for potential collusion and price manipulation. Ensuring these practices do not happen will protect both producers and consumers. This also builds on our September 2025 Memorandum of Understanding with the Department of Justice Antitrust Division to identify anti-competitive behaviors with respect to agricultural inputs, as such consolidation isn't just limited to meat packing, even though that's what we're talking about today. But whether it's seeds and fertilizer and other inputs, the consolidation of agriculture in America has continued unabated for decades, and it is now time to take a very hard look and begin onshoring and reshoring, as the president has so eloquently stated, so much of what we do and produce in America. Just last week, a lot of you were at our press conference on fertilizer, where we certainly underscored the need to do that. The health and diversification of all of these communities, including the packing community, is vital to our long-term national security agenda. More U.S.-owned packers in more American regions of the country provides more opportunities for our ranchers and stronger food security for our country. This strengthens ranchers' ability to market their cattle in a way that makes the most business sense to them. When small and mid-sized processors around the country succeed, the communities they serve and the ranchers they support will also succeed. In closing, I want to reiterate that these efforts are part of the Trump administration's larger plan to make America great again and making agriculture great again. When small and medium-sized packers have a chance to compete and thrive, the cattle herd regains its former strength, and Americans across the country will gain. God bless our great farmers, our ranchers, our producers. God bless our incredible boss, President Trump, who's willing to bust the status quo whenever he believes it's the right thing to do for our country. And certainly there's been no greater partner alongside that effort than Peter Navarro, Director Navarro.
That's the egg price slayer right there. She did some of the most amazing work making sure that egg prices came down quickly, and she's on the case. If she's on the case, then things are going to be happening that are good. And General Blanche, thanks so much for hosting this. Just within a few short weeks, the General Blanche has been here. We've seen a significant uptick across Justice Department, but particularly in the antitrust agency. There's a guy in back. We don't need to name him necessarily, but he's really taken no prisoners, and that's what today is about. At the White House, there is no more important war on the economic front than the war on inflation, or what the Democrats use as a buzzword, affordability. The irony, of course, there is that much of the inflation that we inherited originated from actions like them. One of the biggest problems we have is inflation in beef. Inflation in beef. And one of the reasons has to do with just the way nature has been for the last decade or more. Drought has been a very big problem. There's not much we up here can do about that. But there are policies, for example, the withholding by the Biden vegans of literally millions of acres of grazing land. And we are swiftly moving that back in to help lower costs. But the biggest thing in my judgment that we're suffering from, particularly in the beef market, but also General Blanche mentioned chicken and turkey and pork, is industry concentration. Both General Blanche and Secretary Rollins have alluded to this 85% control. I'll give you the nerd view as an economist who was in antitrust for a while. There's this thing that the 4 firms is a magic number. It's the 4 firm concentration ratio that's been enshrined in Justice Department doctrine for decades. And it basically says when you approach even something like 60%, you invite collusion, either explicit or tacit. And that's not only the problem we have here, it's that half of the 4 are Brazilian. Half of the 4 are Brazilian. And in my tariff world, I remember vividly just recently when the president put tariffs on Brazil because of actions they were taking which were harmful to the American people. What happened? The beef lobby, represented by the Brazilians, quietly threatened the White House. And we saw beef that should otherwise be on the counters sold in American grocery stores going where? China. So it's not just price gouging and price fixing we have to worry about. It's also the influence of foreigners on our supply chain and the national security issues that are associated with that. We cannot tolerate that. And so General Blanche alluded to a settlement coming up this week. I can tell you that there's supposed to be a trial in Minnesota this week. It's a company called AgriStats. What is AgriStats? This is like the mathematician's worst nightmare in terms of monopoly behavior. Basically, what the companies in this concentrated industry were doing was individually sending in data on everything, consumers, production, everything in between. And what did that computer do? It spit back what the monopoly price should be. Justice Department said, no more, no mas. That's not going to happen on our watch. And that case, I believe, is going to be settled well or at trial in a way which not only will take care of that problem, but implicates some of the bad actions that we've seen by the 2 American companies, Tyson's and Cargill, and JBS on the Brazilian side, along with National Beef. Although I hasten to add here that the Brazilians are far more of the problem. And it's complicated by the fact that the Brazilians, particularly JBS, hands out millions of dollars to our American political system like it's candy. And the rate of return they get on that would make a Wall Street hedge fund blush. And we got to put a stop to that. And you're going to hear from the ranchers at the front lines what they've suffered. I can tell you that a small herd and a high concentration ratio are a recipe for exactly the kind of beef inflation we get getting. The last thing I want to mention, General Blanche alluded to the whistleblower program. He's really understating one of the great things justice is doing. This is a big deal. The first award that was given to an insider was $1 million for blowing the whistle on some kind of used car scheme. Okay. Think about that. And here's the reason why the whistleblower program is so important. It's because those are the folks who actually know where the bodies are buried, where the prices are fixed, where the shutdown of a meat packing house was really not because there was an electrical problem, it was something else. So I welcome my friends with the hats. I think that's a giveaway that they might be the ranchers in the room. And again, I want to thank you both for just kicking butt here. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope your day's going well. My name is Shad Sullivan, and I am an American cattle rancher. My family and I derive 100% of our income from the beef and cattle industry. First of all, I'd like to thank Jesus Christ for his favor on this nation for 250 years. America 250. Let's go. I'd also like to thank President Trump and his administration, including the Department of Justice, USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins, for fighting on behalf of the American people and returning to the founding principles to defend liberty and freedom. For too long, farmers, ranchers, and American consumers have suffered at the hands of consolidated power. Just in the last generation, we have lost 665,000 beef cattle in operations, which is 50% down from 1980. We have also lost 86,000 farmer feeders, which is 1,000 head and below. This has been driven by years of mergers and acquisitions of multinational corporations and foreign meat conglomerates. That has created a level of economic and political power that too often escapes oversight and accountability. As a result, unrestrained market control by these powerful corporations has increased input costs for producers, decreased profitability, and forced many to become price takers. While at the same time, this market control drives up costs for consumers. President Trump's recognition that this level of concentration has possibly led to market control and manipulation, political leverage, and vulnerabilities in our supply chains and food security is crucial to upholding our sovereignty and safety in this nation. Restoring a fair marketplace, rebuilding a resilient American food system, and protecting the food security of this nation are critical in securing an integral marketplace that strengthens rural America, supports local economies, and ensures consumer affordability. Today signals that these concerns are being taken seriously. We respect the process, and we applaud the Trump administration for taking steps forward to restore a fair and competitive marketplace for American producers and consumers. I will reiterate that food security is national security, and I submit to you today, where there is beef, there is freedom. May God bless America, and thank you very much. Mhm.
Well said. Shad is a fifth-generation rancher with ranches in Colorado and Texas. Hayden, I said Idaho. Did I get that right? Utah and Arizona. I was worried I'd missed the state. Utah, Arizona, sixth generation. And then the incredible Campbells right here, fifth generation Colorado ranchers too. They represent tens of thousands of some of our greatest Americans across this country. And we're just so proud to represent you and hopefully make some good change for you all moving forward. With that, we'll take questions, hopefully on topic, but yes, go ahead. If you'll introduce yourself as well.
Leah Nyland from Bloomberg. So the Justice Department had opened a meatpacking investigation in 2020 and closed it last year. Can you tell us what is different about this investigation into meatpacking?
We open and close investigations regularly. I think that circumstances change, whether it's circumstances within the Department of Justice and priorities that we have, but also within the industry. And you just heard a lot of facts and numbers and data and statistics that explain why we're doing our investigation now, why we started it, last year. And these investigations, at the risk of stating the obvious, are difficult. They take time. They take a lot of data processing of information provided by the industry, by everybody up and down the chain, and then also meetings and talking to witnesses. So I'm not going to explain or justify why a different administration shut down a different investigation, but this investigation, like we talked about, is being done, I assure you, for the right reasons, given not only what President Trump directed in the executive order, but the reality of the industry right now.
I can tell you the big difference is velocity, intent, and actual action. And you're going to see in this settlement that it is going to unleash a set of forces that are going to ripple through this industry rapidly and in a way which is going to allow us to get the bottom of this. So this is a new regime. This is a new form of moving, and it's at Trump speed.
And just very quickly, I will say, I think that perhaps more than ever before in American history, we now realize the threat to our sovereignty, to our freedom, to our liberty, as we look in total at the consolidation in America, but also perhaps the biggest priority would be the consolidation at the hands of foreign countries and foreign-owned companies. And we're not here today to talk about, for example, China owning U.S. farmland, but in 1983, China owned 2,000 acres. Today, they own almost 300,000 acres. 20 years ago, there were 40 fertilizer companies providing nitrogen fertilizer. Today, there are 3. Seeds the same. It is a national security issue, and at the same time, we're losing thousands of these producers every year. So I think when you take all of that in total, you take an extremely aggressive president who wants to stand by rural America, return prosperity to rural America, stand by his ranchers and his farmers, make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep that way of life alive and vibrant and vigorous. I think that would explain why we're doubling down today. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Dave Michaels with the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, Dave.
You're appealing for whistleblowers today, so are you confirming it's a criminal investigation? And then you're blaming the foreign meat packers. Are you going to focus on the foreign meat packers? How are you going to charge only foreign meat packers if you have a 4-member cartel?
I mean, I'm not going to jump to conclusions around what the results of the investigation will be. That wouldn't be fair to the folks here at the department that are working it, or to the meat packers that we're investigating. The idea of whistleblowers, of people coming forward with information they have, is one of the best and most efficient ways that we can solve antitrust violations, criminally or otherwise. And so we just want to make sure people in this industry realize that we're putting money where our mouth is. We're not asking you to come forward and then see what happens. We're saying, if you come forward and if your information results in a finding, in a conviction, and the amount of money is over $1 million, which in this industry is not a very high bar, that you stand to recover up to 30%. And so we have to incentivize people to make a very difficult choice and come forward with information if they had it. And that's what we're trying to do. But we're not standing up here announcing the results of the investigation. We're putting a finer point on what President Trump said last year in his executive order, which is, this is a real problem. It's a national security problem. It's a price problem for American consumers, and it's a problem for the industry, for the hardworking ranchers that have existed for 5 generations, 6 generations in this country. So that's the reason behind what we're talking about today.
So, just the type of investigation. I mean,
Can you speak up?
just the type of investigation. Can you confirm it's predominantly a criminal investigation at this point?
I mean, these investigations, it depends. And so it depends. So yes, there are, in the antitrust space, the criminal part of the investigation is something that is done in almost every case in parallel with the civil investigation. The facts matter, intent matters. What we find from from the bad participants, if there are bad participants, what role they had. So it's not as if, oh, this is just civil, or, oh, this is just criminal. It's an investigation. And if we find evidence of criminal conduct and criminal intent, we'll go from there.
Marcia.
Hi, Marcia Brown with Politico. You've talked a lot about how this will lower prices for consumers and help American ranchers. When do you expect consumers to feel that price relief at the grocery store, and for ranchers to also experience relief from this?
So as we've outlined, Marcia, you've heard 100 times, maybe not all the reporters in the room, being at a 75-year herd low, being at this point in the market, taken in total with, as I mentioned, the last administration moving cattle, doing everything they could to basically eviscerate the cattle industry, whether that was through grazing allotments or climate change, hoax, craziness, whatever it was. On top of that, you have the droughts. Even in Nebraska, the fire they just had was in rural Nebraska, so it didn't get as much press as a lot of these wildfires do. But it was the biggest fire in Nebraska history, the 9th largest in American history, and we're not really talking about it because it was in rural America. But what that does to those ranchers. So all of that taken in total, combined with obviously the screwworm south of the border. We've had to keep the ports closed to make sure that stays out, which, thank the Lord we've been able to, against all models showing it would be here last year. But you marry that to this effort and the long-term infrastructure that we are building in order to mitigate this sort of thing from ever happening again. Marcia, I wish I had a crystal ball and I could tell you, we do believe that prices are going to start coming down this summer based on.
Okay, really quick. So I've only turned subscriber modes on because I see a lot of people are in the chat saying a lot of things that can get the channel demonetized. So please make sure you subscribe and like the stream. It is greatly appreciated. We still have to protect the channel and we still have to protect the chat. So please make sure that you subscribe and also make sure that you like the stream.
Opening up the allotments, putting more money into mid-size and smaller processors, incentivizing our ranchers, and instead of slaughtering to keep their heifers, et cetera. I'm getting way into ag stuff now, but we are hopeful that those prices will start coming down this summer, this fall. But again, this is a massive, complicated policy challenge that we're working to fight every single day and solve for. So thank you. Yes, ma'am. And then we'll go to you in the front.
Hi, Kushita Vasan from MLEX. Could you talk about how close you are to filing a lawsuit, and have the companies been cooperating? Have you seen delay tactics? Have they been destroying documents?
So I'm not going to talk about timing because I don't have an answer. If I had an answer, I would share it with you. But just to understand that there is a lot of work that's been done and there's a lot of work to do, and we are moving as quickly as we can. And I think that you've seen antitrust investigations in the past last more than one administration sometimes, and so go on for years and years and years and years. And there's things that we can do in the department to make sure that doesn't happen here, whether it's just making sure that subpoenas are responded to on time, making sure that we have the resources that are devoted to these investigations that should be. So I will tell you, we're doing that. So we are, this is a priority. It has been a priority. But we're not in a position where I can say, hold your breath, it's coming forward. But that's not to say that we're in it for the very long haul. We're not.
Just given that two of these companies are foreign owned, there's a risk that they might be destroying documents or not playing ball. Have you seen any delay tactics, or have they been just, not turning in documents on time?
The nature of this investigation would not allow me to talk about what we've learned in that space. So if there's a time when it's appropriate to bring charges, or if there's a time when it's appropriate to make an announcement about not bringing charges or what we're doing, we'll do that. But it's these investigations, and you can look back over history and see the meaningful antitrust investigations that have been very successful to the American consumer and the American businessman. They do take time, and it's not the kind of thing where we can provide updates along the way that will satisfy the folks that are saying, hey, President Trump issued that executive order last year. And that's one of the reasons why we thought it was appropriate to be here today, to make sure that everybody knows that this is something that we're working very hard on. Unfortunately, I can't accompany that with details about the investigation beyond what we've already said.
Yes.
Let's remember that meat is also chicken, pork, turkey. There's also fish as a protein. And when you do things like General Blanche and Secretary Rollins are doing in this space, these folks are now aware, and they're going to be hypersensitive to any kind of things that they might pull. So you might expect at the margin, beef's the hardest because of the conditions, but across the meat and other issues of the ag sector, they're going to start behaving better. That's not going to forgive what they've done in the past, but these kind of actions create benefits in and of themselves as the investigation goes forward.
We'll do one more. Yes, sir.
Yes, Jerry Hagstrom from the Hagstrom Report. Is your goal to get these companies to break up to create more companies? And do you want the Brazilians to sell their interests to Americans?
I think, Jerry, the goal is to preserve a way of life of rural America, to ensure that our food security is absolute, that the importance of being able to feed ourselves in this country and not to rely on other countries is, again, it's absolute. And back to our founder's vision 250 years ago, and that this president, I believe, has revivified in such an incredibly remarkable way, is putting America first. And what that means is putting all of it first, but from my lane, making sure that we can feed and fuel and clothe ourselves. And these other countries are playing the long game. They've got a 100-year plan. And, you know, we're arguing, until this president, we're arguing over who should go in what bathroom and certain, you know, things that in the long run don't necessarily solidify America and our national security. And so that's how important this is. I don't want to answer those questions specifically, because that's the importance of this investigation, to fully understand what we're facing, what it looks like, and what we need to do to ensure that our ranchers and our farmers and our agricultural community have everything they need, and that we also are able to reverse this trajectory of smaller and smaller producers in the country. I think that the MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again movement, is such a big part of this, as Americans begin to understand the importance of eating real food. Of course, the real winners in that are all Americans as we move back towards a healthier population, but also the other winners are our farmers and ranchers, who will be the ones providing the real food. And let me just finish with this. I was on a call on this issue about a month ago. It was with some smaller meat processors in North Dakota. And one of them, and very small, one of them said, you know, for $60,000 low interest loan, I could add a grinder to my very small processing plant in rural North Dakota for $60,000, a loan from USDA. And what that would allow me to do is go from processing 1 head a week to 6. And again, processing 6 head a week is not going to feed America or feed the world, but what it will do is feed a community. And that is the goal, to get back to healthier, more locally produced food, and ensuring that it is by companies and people that have America's best interest at heart. So thank you all for being here. And I especially want to thank our Attorney General. God bless you. Thank you.
Such high hopes, and then were derailed when promises were not kept and the word of members of both the Senate and the House were not kept. The forthcoming reconciliation package that this budget resolution tees up will fully fund the men and women of ICE and CBP, along with many others who have gone without pay while they protect and serve our nation. Funding those who protect us should never have become a political football. Unfortunately, it's the continuation of the Democrat mantra to defund the police. They're on record refusing to fund the entirety of the Department of Homeland Security multiple times. When you ask them point blank about this, their carefully choreographed response is that they've always supported DHS and that they have come up with solutions to do that. Those solutions all have a common thread. They're piecemeal approaches. I suppose they're just too shy to come out and admit that purposefully concealed fact. We're finishing the appropriations process with this budget resolution and eliminating the unnecessary delays, obstruction, and obfuscation that have persisted for far too long. Finally, we'll turn to HR 2616, the Stopping Indoctrination and Protecting Kids Act. This legislation would defend a parent's express right to access critical information regarding the environment of his or her child's school. As we've seen too many times, the rights of parents have been subject to egregious attacks. These men and women who want to protect their children and ensure that they can thrive have been subjugated by school districts, rogue educators, and incompetent school administrators. This is wrong and entirely unacceptable. Parents must always have a seat at the table when it comes to their child's education, and they must always be able to exercise their rights. HR 2616 empowers parental involvement, prevents teachers from being pressured by administrators to keep secrets from their students' parents, and reinforces the critical need for parental engagement throughout their child's education. In addition, this legislation prohibits federal funds from being spent on teaching or advancing concepts related to gender ideology that has no place in America's classrooms. With that, let's get down to business. But before I yield to Mr. McGovern, I want to recognize former member Dennis Kucinich from Ohio. Well, welcome, Dennis. We're pleased to have you. Thank you. I now yield to the ranking member for any comments he wishes to make.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And before we begin, I want to just take a moment to remember our colleague David Scott, who passed last week. Congressman Scott was a trailblazer, the first Black chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and a public servant who cared deeply about the people too often left out and left behind. And I want to extend my deepest sympathy to his family and his staff and his constituents. I also want to express my profound gratitude to the officers who apprehended the gunman at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and to say that political violence is always wrong. These awful incidents of gun violence at political rallies, at churches and synagogues and classrooms, on our streets, must not be normalized, and we must do better as a society. I too want to recognize our former colleague Dennis Kucinich and his wife Elizabeth, who are here today. Appreciate all that they continue to do for our country, and I want to recognize a number of familiar faces in the audience, who have dedicated, their lives to making America healthier again, to protecting our families from excessive use of pesticides, and who have been dedicated to making sure our kids have better access to nutrition. So I welcome everybody here today. Now, Madam Chair, turning to what we are meeting on this week, or rather what we are not meeting on. Because despite today's packed agenda, not a single thing Republicans have scheduled for today's hearings will focus on the cost of living. Not a single thing will bring down prices. Not a single thing will address the affordability crisis facing American families. I mean, look at our schedule for today. You have us debating a ridiculous culture war bill about trans kids, a flawed FISA bill that lets the government spy on Americans, a farm bill that betrays farmers and makes the affordability crisis worse, and a budget resolution that tees up yet another blank check to ICE and CBP, lawless agencies that are acting outside the bounds of the law. You guys are doing nothing to lower food or gas prices, nothing on healthcare, nothing on childcare or rent or utility bills, nothing to help regular people with kitchen table issues. Even Fox News has caught on. They just released a poll showing that a majority of voters now think Democrats would do a better job than Republicans on lowering prices and fixing the economy. And we need to look no further than this week's bills to see why that might be the case. And let me just go through them. HR 2616 is yet another bill focused on, you guessed it, trans people. With all that's going on in people's lives, this is what you guys think we need to be spending time on? Who asked for this? Why are you guys so obsessed with transgender people? Maybe your approval rating on the economy wouldn't be in the gutter if you guys spent less time policing people's personal lives and more time focusing in on affordability. This is the United States Congress, for God's sake. You all think that this is what we should be debating right now? A bill on what names kids are allowed to be called in school? I mean, this is pathetic and it is embarrassing. And then we have the Pfizer reauthorization. And let me just say, it is nice to actually have time to read the bill text. I want to thank you for keeping your word on that. But that is where my compliments end.
Wait a minute, time out. Didn't they come up with a whole entire bill that you could land you in jail, or you can be having to pay fines if you misgendered people or you misnamed, like dead name people? Is he serious right now? Didn't that happen under the Biden administration? He can't be serious.
This bill extends Section 702 for 3 years, but it does not include a real warrant requirement for searches of Americans' communications. This text still lets the FBI collect, search, and review the private communications of Americans whose data ends up in the 702 system without a judge signing off on it. Now, I don't trust Kash Patel to tell me the correct time. I certainly don't trust him to do the right thing without judicial oversight. We've already seen his willingness to weaponize the agency he runs to further his own personal and political agenda. There ought to be a real warrant requirement, period, end of story. And that brings me to the Farm Bill. I sit on the Agriculture Committee. I've worked on hunger, nutrition, and farming issues for a long time. This Farm Bill, in my view, is a disaster. It is an awful, ugly, rotten farm bill. We have 40 million people in this country who are hungry, 40 million people struggling to afford food. And by the way, it's getting worse because of Trump's stupid tariffs and illegal war in Iran that are driving up food costs. And rather than addressing the concerns of everyday people, rather than helping families afford nutritious food, you guys are using the Farm Bill, our #1 tool of agricultural policy in this country, to protect the big ag monopolies that profit from ultra-processed food and the multi-billion-dollar pesticide companies that dump toxins into our food, air, and water. And I wish I were kidding, but I'm not. Republicans already made the biggest cut to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program in history last year. 3 million Americans have already been cut off of food assistance because of your big, ugly bill. And now you want to lock those cuts in for 5 years? Nearly $200 billion worth of cuts to a program that provides hungry seniors and veterans and kids and workers with an average benefit of a little over $2 per person per meal. Again, instead of reversing your cuts, instead of helping hungry people, you're giving a nice fat giveaway to donors and lobbyists at the multi-billion-dollar pesticide companies. I think that's sick. I think it's immoral. And when it comes to the budget resolution, oh my God, just when I think I've seen it all, we have a budget resolution that lays the groundwork for another blank check to ICE and CBP, agencies that are abusing their authority, lying about it, and killing American citizens in the streets. ICE and CBP already have more money than they know what to do with. And with this budget resolution, you guys are moving heaven and earth to give them more instead of focusing in on affordability, focusing on kitchen table issues, focusing on bringing down the cost of living. If budgets are moral documents, your budget needs an exorcism. You're not even trying to reopen the rest of DHS with this plan. TSA and the Coast Guard, FEMA, they would still be shut down. I mean, while communities across the country continue to get hit with storms, floods and wildfires, the agency that is supposed to help, FEMA, is still not fully funded. Their workers aren't getting paid. And you guys are just sitting on a bipartisan Senate compromise that could get all of it back up and running. It's been sent over to you guys twice. It's pitiful. And when it comes to our overall fiscal health, you guys are a disaster. You're okay sending billions of dollars to the Middle East on a war that nobody asked for or nobody wants. You're fine with giving billions of tax breaks to billionaires or big corporations. Doge was a disaster. It cost more money than it saved. And now you're trying to give up to $140 billion in additional funding to ICE and CBP after you stole that much and much more from nutrition assistance for hungry families. And you want to pretend like any of that is fiscally responsible? I mean, what a crock. This whole meeting, as far as I'm concerned, is insulting. No more money for our farmers, but plenty of money for a slush fund to murder American citizens. Pesticide companies getting massive new giveaways while hungry families get left behind. This is a disgrace, Madam Chair, and the American people know it. They know this Rules Committee meeting is not about affordability. They see this Republican Congress is not about lowering the cost of living. And they see that after over a year in power, this majority has failed to deliver and in fact has broken almost every promise. You guys only care about rewarding special interests, rewarding big donors, rewarding pesticide companies, rewarding big ag, rewarding those at the top, and you're betraying everyone you promised to help, including your own voters. So as far as I'm concerned, a reckoning is coming in November. And for the people in my district who are getting screwed over by the policies of this Congress and this administration, the reckoning can't come soon enough. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. I think by the end of the meeting, we'll know how you feel about things. Without objection, any prepared statements that our witnesses may have will be included in the record. I now welcome our first panel, Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Craig from the Committee on Agriculture. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask that you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Thompson, I welcome your testimony.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today concerning the Farm Bill. First, I'd like to acknowledge the loss of Agriculture Committee has experienced this year. Doug LaMalfa and David Scott were friends, brothers in the Lord, and staunch advocates for rural America. We miss them dearly, but we are proud to honor them in this Farm Bill this year by naming programs in their memory. Their legacies will live on in the David A. Scott 1890 Scholarship Program and the Doug LaMalfa Rural Schools Program. The Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026 is years in the making. Producers have operated under an extension of 2018 policy since 2023. That cannot continue. Producers are currently facing some of the toughest times in the farm economy since the 1980s farm crisis. And the simple fact is that the 2018 policies are no match for 2026 challenges. This bill is unique because it wasn't written in Washington. It was written out in the fields and the pastures of our great nation. We visited 43 states and one territory, holding over 150 Farm Bill listening sessions. This is in addition to the countless hearings and meetings we held with producers here in Washington. Through these efforts, we heard a lot of different needs, but everyone agreed on one thing: Congress needed to get to work and pass a new Farm Bill. As of today, over 500 stakeholder organizations have expressed public support for the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026. I'd like to say that again. Over 500 organizations support this bill because they see the benefits to America's farm families and ranch families. That number alone shows how worthy this bill is of our time. Stakeholders across the country and throughout the entire agriculture supply chain support the 2026 Farm Bill, and they are counting on us to bring it home. The Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2026 is also a bipartisan bill, and that is by design. We're not playing political games with the future of rural America. We're focused on policy that threads the needle of responsible spending and meaningful impact back home. Today, we hear some comments against the bill, perhaps from my ranking member, and I respect her views and her right to express them. However, opposition from my ranking member does not change the fact that this is a bipartisan farm bill. 7 Democrats on the Agriculture Committee voted for this bill last month after a markup that lasted over 22 hours and included debate on over 100 amendments. Adopted amendments included markups were evenly split between Republicans and Democrats. And when you consider that almost 200 marker bills that were incorporated into the base text of the Farm Bill, 82% of those bills had bipartisan co-sponsors. But these are the facts, and loud opposition from a select few does not change them. And I have a great respect for the chairman and ranking member and the members of this committee, and I trust that you all work in good faith to ensure the Farm Bill debate is fair, informed, and a worthy one. And before us, we have the opportunity to do some real good for rural America. So thank you once again for the opportunity to come before you today.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Ranking Member Craig, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Fox and Ranking Member McGovern. I too want to acknowledge the great loss our committee has had during this session of Congress with the loss of Doug LaMalfa, as well as our colleague David Scott. I wish we were here today to debate the finer points of a bipartisan 5-year, 12-title farm bill, because that is what farmers and working people desperately need right now. Tariffs and trade wars have closed American farmers out of markets, costing them an estimated $54 billion and counting. Farmers are also dealing with higher cost of farm inputs like fuel, fertilizer, seeds, and labor. Farm bankruptcies are up nearly 50%. I'm going to stop and repeat that. Farm bankruptcies are up nearly 50%. And in the Midwest, it's closer to 70%. We lost 15,000 farms in the United States last year. Farmers need an end to the trade wars. They need economic assistance to stay afloat. They need input costs to come down. Yet, the bill before us today does not address any of those problems. This bill doesn't lower input cost. It doesn't help us regain or expand our export markets. It doesn't expand domestic markets either. It doesn't stabilize fertilizer or diesel prices, and it doesn't offer a single penny in farm aid. My Republican colleagues are calling this a skinny farm bill, and maybe that's because they know that there's not enough meat on the bone that is going to save our family farms, nor is it a real farm bill. I object to calling this a farm bill. This is not the farm bill. Most of the funding for crop insurance and other important titles were funded through reconciliation. It's a dangerous precedent that my Republican colleagues have set here. Farm country needs a full 5-year, 12-title, robust farm bill that helps solve their biggest problems, not a skinny farm bill that leaves so many questions unanswered and so many problems unsolved. And mark my words, we are going to be right back here in a year if this administration continues the bad policies that are impacting farm country. We're going to be back here in a year trying to save family farms all over again. While farm country's hurting, so are many other parts of America. This farm bill leaves behind working people, children, and seniors, and refuses to help address the food affordability crisis. In fact, it's even worse than that. In reconciliation, the Ag Committee this session of Congress cut nearly $187 billion in funding to the SNAP program. Trump's tariffs will cost the average American household $2,500 this year, up from $1,700 last year. That's well more than the small tax refunds that middle-class Americans are reportedly seeing this year. Does this bill help make life more affordable? No. In fact, it locks in place the $187 billion cut to SNAP made in reconciliation. Making sure that America's elderly and children can eat at a time of rising cost was one of Democrats' top priorities for the Farm Bill. It was dismissed by Republicans, ignored, just like the biggest problems in farm country are ignored by this bill. Now, my chairman, who I dearly respect, says that this was a bipartisan farm bill. Sure, it got a few Democrats on it, but Republicans took about 10% of our bipartisan ideas and included it in the Farm Bill that we are discussing today. USDA says that more than 3 million Americans have already been kicked off food assistance thanks to the $187 billion in cuts that this Farm Bill locks in. And now we're hearing reports that the majority may be coming back for more SNAP cuts in a future reconciliation bill. Are you kidding me? That's anything but a bipartisan process. And let me repeat, because I've been here long enough to know that these cycles change, let me repeat that this is a very dangerous precedent. To make matters worse, this bill sides with multi-billion-dollar pesticide companies over our neighbors by barring local and state governments from setting health and safety standards for certain products and depriving people hurt by pesticides the right to have their day in court. It cuts the nation's most popular farm conservation program, EQIP, by $1 billion. It preempts Prop 12, which set food quality and animal welfare standards in California, and will have far-reaching consequences and roll back hundreds of state laws across the country, red and blue alike. This bill is not ready for prime time, folks. It can be much improved, and it should be reworked to solve the biggest challenges facing family farmers. I encourage this panel to vote no. The Senate is beginning its own negotiations, and my hope is they send us a more bipartisan solution that actually meets the needs of America's family farmers and working Americans. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ranking Member Craig. Chairman Thompson, I'm going to begin by asking you a question. Right after the markup on the Farm Bill, I got a lot of telephone calls from people saying, oh my goodness, what's the Farm Bill going to do to us who hunt and fish and do other things? There was a provision in there related to greyhound racing, my understanding, an animal welfare provision that you all put in. And so I'd like to get you to explain why in this version of the Farm Bill, you've made corrections to calm people about what that provision is going to do to people who want to hunt and fish.
Well, Chairwoman, I want to thank you for sharing those concerns with me early on and for working with us on that fix. Yeah, my phone's lit up too soon after. While I never supported the amendment, I was committed, excuse me, to finding a fix to ensure that hunting, wildlife, and working dogs are not impacted. I'm very pleased that we're able to make that clarification in the Rules Committee print by removing references to live lure training, open field coursing, and bait that is not an inanimate object. We also removed some worrisome definition changes and tightened the role of construction. And with these fixes, I'm confident that the hunting, wildlife, and working dogs are protected. They were never intended to be impacted. This really had to do with the greyhound racing industry, which is almost gone. There were just 2 tracks that are, I understand, that are not profitable in West Virginia. And again, these hunting dogs were never intended. So we were able to accomplish that. And I want to thank you for working with us on those fixes.
Well, thank you. The other question that I have raised all the time is the need for some certainty in agriculture programs. I mean, I hear this from people in every business, every industry when people come in to talk to me. Just give us certainty. Just give us certainty. Can you give us a key example of how this bill adds certainty for America's farmers and ranchers?
Absolutely. And it is a 12-chapter bill and provides significant certainty. And as you noted, every business needs certainty going forward. Certainly our farmers do. And our farmers live in a world and they work in a world every day, getting out of bed at dark 100 hours where they're challenged. Their certainty is challenged because of weather, pests, manpower, just all the issues that market issues as well. And so taking the Farm Bill as a whole, which includes Farm Bill 1.0 that we did last July and 2.0, I would never consider this a skinny Farm Bill. This is 80% of the policy. It may be only 20% of the investment, but it is 80% of the policy. And so certainty in terms of providing measures for crop insurance, which allows our farmers to, to buy into a program to be able to deal with threats from the weather that happen each and every day, unfortunately, when it comes to agriculture. Investments in agriculture research to be able to deal with the pests that are out there, whether they're insects or fungus or viruses, whatever they might be. It's strengthening our trade programs. So it is existing markets, new markets open back up. We're providing tools for our farmers to be able to access those foreign markets. And not every farmer is going to do that. But the fact is, for those who do, that helps overall. It takes excess commodities off the market domestically. Programs like the value added program, which actually allows the individual farmer and really helps mostly small farmers, to be able to avoid that middleman and to be able to process on their farm their commodities in order to make, well, we'll just stick with dairy. That could be selling milk directly, ice cream, cheese, and same thing in terms of our cattle farmers as well. We've got a great provision in here that Mr. Massey is leading. I refer to it as the Subprime Act, a tribute to his math background, actually. And it's a great program that's going to impact all of our states, an opportunity to be able to sell more for small processors, to sell more directly to consumers. I mean, there is just this certainty is really threaded throughout the entire Farm Bill, throughout the Farm Food and National Security Act.
Thank you. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Well, thank you very much. Chairman Thompson, this Farm Bill contains what many people, including myself, and even many Republicans have described as a liability shield for pesticide companies. Let me start with a simple question. Do you believe that glyphosate is safe?
My opinion is not important. What is opinion is the opinion of the scientists. This is an issue that has come down between emotion
Well, the World Health
and
Organization,
science.
for
So I
example,
point to the
says
EPA.
it's a problem.
Which have found glyphosate is probably the most studied chemical or agriculture tool in the country, if not the world. And the United States is not the only one that has found it to be safe. As long as it is stored, administered, and cleaned up according to the instructions that come with the chemical. But that could be said for anything, because anything could be hazardous if you don't use it properly. But there are many European states, nations that have also found it to be safe.
Well, there are a lot of organizations and a lot of reputable scientific organizations that have a very different opinion. And I find it curious that you would cite the EPA, since as long as I recall you going after the EPA on 1,000 different things during my time on the Agriculture Committee. But I guess the issue is you do believe it is safe, right?
I do believe it's safe if it is utilized properly according to how it's labeled. And the provision in the Farm Bill is a labeling provision.
Right. So if glyphosate is so safe, why does the Farm Bill that you wrote create a liability shield for the companies that manufacture it? Why would those companies need a liability shield if glyphosate is so safe?
Well, this bill does not, Mr. McGovern, I worked with you a long time, so I know you've read the bill.
Yeah, 850 pages.
Yeah, I know you did, and I trust you on this. But I have to say that I encourage you to go back and take another look at it, because the bill does not shield companies from being held liable if they harm users. The current failure to warn claims that are being brought forward are based on products not having warning labels, which are not allowed by the EPA. If it's the EPA is approving these tools, they have to have warning labels. And it's clear that these claims should never have been applicable to these products that have been met the EPA regulatory standards. The language to address this issue ensures that companies can still be held liable if they lie or hide information to receive their EPA-approved label, and all other lawsuits, like those related to fraud or negligence, are not impacted by the language. I'll be honest with you, if you've got a bad actor that's lying in terms of the language that they put forward for the labeling purposes, and it harms people, they need to be sued.
Well,
And they will be
well,
with this.
and I strongly disagree with the way you just characterized it from your talking points. But Ms. Greg, do you have any response?
Yeah, I've heard the discussion from my Republican colleagues that this language isn't a liability shield, that there are exemptions. And what I would simply say is, for starters, the language of the exemption requires that an entity currently be committing a violation at the same time that it has already been penalized. That's just not how the criminal justice system works in this country. You don't serve jail time for a crime that you're actively committing. So even if the majority were to fix this issue in their language, it wouldn't fix the problem at the core, which is, in every publicly available case where EPA has penalized a lab or chemical company that submitted false data, it settled. So every single one of those doesn't admit any fault. And so for us, this is really about allowing an individual to have their day in court. I'm not sure why the majority would want to take that away.
And Ranking Member, if I may, they can have their day in court. If they're not in compliance with the EPA, if they're lying or misleading the EPA in terms of the labeling information.
Well, I don't understand.
They're liable to
Why do
sue.
we need this language if everything is so wonderful with glyphosate? I mean,
Well, it's,
I'm just going to say for the record, Mr. Chairman, there are people in this audience here, some of them who have been victims of glyphosate, people who have advocated on behalf of people who have been victimized by glyphosate,
well-
people who have gotten cancer. I mean, do you believe those individuals? I mean, do you believe in jury trials? I mean, which one is it? Because it seems to me like this is protecting Monsanto from losing a lot of money because they keep losing lawsuit after lawsuit because, for example, they gave farm workers cancer. I mean, if you believe that those jury verdicts are wrong, turn to the people behind you and tell them so. I mean, yeah.
well, I will tell you that there's nothing but study more out there than glyphosate. And quite frankly, I mean, that's the same bill that, the ranking member was the lead co-sponsor of the language last Congress. And when it says about should people have a jury trial, what part of my statement to you
I guess
is
if
that
it's
there is
so-
no liability shield. And if it's a bad actor,
Well,
they have the ability to be sued and have that day in court.
yeah, if it's been so studied, then why does these companies need a liability shield? Ms. Craig?
Mr. McGovern, I just want to mention that just a few months ago, 137 members of the House submitted a letter opposing this language. And there's bipartisan opposition to this provision, as you can see from the amendments that have been submitted to the Rules Committee. So in the amendment process, Republicans and Democrats have been clear that the inclusion of this language threatens the passage of a broad bipartisan farm bill. For the life of me, from the start of our negotiations, I have said that if this provision is in the bill, we will oppose the bill.
Well, which brings me to another question. I mean, we do have an amendment, as Ranking Member Craig pointed out, the Pingree-Massey Amendment. Some of us are sponsors of it as well. You're the chairman of the Agriculture Committee. Would you be in favor of making that amendment in order?
That is not my choice. I have never upset anyone in leadership enough to be placed on the Rules Committee. And so that is not my place to say
I'm just going to say
of whether it should be made in order.
To be honest with you, I'm tired of that response.
Do I support the amendment? No, I don't.
Well,
support that
the question is whether or not members of the House ought to have the opportunity to debate and vote on it. And, yes or no. I mean, the deal is you are the chairman of the Agriculture Committee. You come before the Rules Committee to inform us what you are presenting. But you also, because I was the chairman of this committee at one time, I hope to be again, But right now, as we're speaking in the back room, your staff is meeting with Republican Rules Committee staff, deciding what amendments should be made in order and what amendments should not be made in order. So I know you have an opinion on whether it should be made in
Well,
order. Do we have an opportunity to present it? Because I think we can win on this. To be-
Well, I support the language which is in the Farm Food and National Security Act. I do not support the
Yeah,
amendment.
you
that is
support
being
the
offered.
idea of the amendment being made in order so that we can actually debate and vote on it. That's the question. I know you don't, I know you don't support
I
it.
support regular order. I'm not going to, I don't have a say in terms of the Rules Committee. Of
Yes, you do,
what's to be
Mr.
made
Chairman.
in
I don't know why you, I don't know why you're here if you don't have an opinion. You're testifying on this bill. I mean, the idea that you don't have an opinion of whether or not that amendment should be made in
Well,
order.
I'm not sure my opinion matters a whole lot when I came out and said that I don't believe,
Well,
I don't think there should be a liability shield. And then you went on a tantrum that somehow I do think that there should be a liability shield. I will also say that the language that we have basically addresses what our farmers need. This really is about health.
Yeah,
The
we-
EPA doing the labeling, they have hundreds of scientists that work diligently to make sure that things are not only safe, but to determine what should be on the label in terms of
Right, but
preparation,
this bill goes further to
application,
basically
and
limit what
cleanup.
states can do if this were to become law. So the
States-
states that felt that there was a
states
greater
would-
danger, they're going to be they're going to be prevented from, from advising their farmers.
Now,
But let me ask you a question, Mr.
well,
Chair.
can I-
Have you or your staff, do you communicate with people at Bayer Monsanto, the manufacturer of glyphosate?
Oh, I communicate with all those who are involved in agriculture, production and
So
processing.
that's yeah.
That would include Bayer, but includes a lot of
Right.
different types of producers. I will also say that speaking of states have the ability not to register
Well,
with our language. States do have the ability to refuse to register any particular agriculture. chemical.
Clearly, Monsanto and these big companies want this desperately. I mean, do you have any?
Our farmers
idea
want it more than
about-
what they
about-
do.
Not the farmers. I mean, this is.
No,
this
our
is a
farmers
giveaway-
need this
This is a
toll.
giveaway to a corporate special interest. Do you have any idea about how much money Crop Life America, the pesticide industry lobbyists, donate to members of Congress on a yearly basis?
I don't.
I mean, do you take money from them?
I earn support from people based on what I believe in agriculture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've taken $32,500 from them since 2019. I don't know how much other members of the committee and other members of Congress have gotten. But the bottom line, to come up here and to say this is much ado about nothing, that this is not liability protection, it is insulting, quite frankly, because, I mean, anybody who reads this knows what's going on here. And again, and to not have an opinion about whether we should, have this made in order. I mean, we're the Rules Committee. You're here to testify, to give your opinions. I don't understand, the reason why so many people hide behind, oh, I don't have an opinion.
I'm not hiding behind anything. I
Well,
don't
you-
support the
I will
amendment.
tell you, if you said right now to Chairwoman Fox, I really believe, even if I disagree with the amendment, that the amendment should be made in order, we should have a debate on it, I think that would carry a lot of weight.
I don't support the amendments being brought forward.
Okay, well, let me go on to another issue, so we can't get answers on glyphosate. I want to turn to food costs. I have nearly 1,900 farmers in my district at last count, and they're being hurt by the policies of this administration, and they're going to be hurt by this farm bill. My farmers are struggling, some of them going bankrupt, and they're calling my office and telling me that it's because of Donald Trump and the policies of this administration. They're livid about the war in Iran. They are livid about the tariffs that are screwing them over. And some of them feel betrayed by this administration, which said it was going to help rural communities, but it's done the opposite. So my question is, true or false? As written, this bill does nothing to stop the implementation of the tariffs on agricultural inputs. Is that true?
It's not our jurisdiction.
Okay,
You
so
should know that
it's
as
true.
well as anybody.
It's true.
That's Ways and Means,
True
by the
true
way.
or false? Rising diesel costs because of the war in Iran will lead to rising food costs. There's nothing in this bill that addresses that, right?
Rising fuel costs would be energy and commerce, not
So
the
that's- so
agriculture
the answer
committee,
is it's
not
true.
eligible to be
No-
within a
nothing-
farm bill.
Okay, I'll tell you, I've been on the Rules Committee a lot of times, And sometimes germaneness issues don't always apply. Sometimes they attach the front of a Volkswagen to the back of a Cadillac up here. And the bottom line is, if we wanted to address the issues of affordability, we would be doing it in this.
And that would be
True
the
or false,
decision
not
of
a
the
single
Rules
provision
Committee
in this
or
bill
leadership?
addresses the high fertilizer and diesel costs that farmers are facing because of the war in Iran, right? Is that true?
We were having significant problems with that. I mean, I think we should all set a goal. I appreciate the administration, what they just came out with. I want them to be a little more bold. I think we should be independent of foreign fertilizer within 5 years.
Let me ask Ranking Member Craig, is there anything, does this bill do anything to lower food prices for Americans?
No, in fact, it locks in $187 billion in SNAP cuts, which makes food harder to afford for millions of Americans.
Madam Chair, I just ask your indulgence. This is an 850-page bill, 5 years, and I think some of these issues need to be addressed. Everything that everything that Ranking Member Craig and the Democrats on this committee warned you about in May is actually happening. 3 million people are already being abruptly cut off of food assistance in this country because of the big ugly bill. And the rest of your Republican colleagues and joined you in jamming that through Congress. At the exact time as Trump's war and stupid economic policies are making the affordability crisis worse, I mean, you're screwing over the people who need help the most. And instead of fixing this mess, and that's what people are looking for, us to fix this mess, you're here asking us to pass a farm bill that locks in these terrible policies for 5 years. This is nuts. And look, Chairman Thompson, do you know how many veterans have lost food assistance in Pennsylvania since the big ugly bill went into effect? Do you know a number?
I don't have an exact
tell you
number, but I can tell you anybody that has come off of SNAP,
In Massachusetts.
anybody has come off of SNAP,
In Massachusetts.
probably has come
I'm
off
looking for a
because they
number.
found gainful employment that the Farm Bill.
In
uh,
Massachusetts,
that
200 veterans
nutrition
have already
provides
lost their
for.
benefits. You know how many homeless people have lost food assistance in Pennsylvania? In Massachusetts, it's 2,600 have already lost their benefits. Do you know how many parents of kids lost food assistance in Pennsylvania?
Well, the question I have for you, Mr. Ranking
Well, I'll tell
Member,
you,
is how many of those
I'm
have
asking the
have
questions
achieved
here.
gainful employment
3,500
through-
in Massachusetts have
through
lost,
their career,
have lost.
SNAP employment, career and technical education being paid for as a part of the
Well,
nutrition
just
title?
one final thing. I just want, the cost shift is about to go into, is about to go into effect. And a bipartisan group of states, a bipartisan group of governors is begging the Republicans here in Congress to delay, to comply with this, to delay the compliance with this new law. They have said they need time to support accurate implementation of the law. Given that your stated goal with this terrible new law is program integrity, that's what you always say, why are you ignoring the people who actually have to implement the bill, who are saying this is going to impact their ability to accurately implement the program? Madam Chair, I appreciate you banging the gavel, but I would just say, for all the time that I was here as chair of this committee, I never cut any of you off. And this is an important issue. It's an important issue for the health and the well-being of people in this country, for farm workers, and it's an important issue with regard to whether or not people have food, which I think ought to be viewed as a fundamental human right in this country. And the nearly $200 billion in cuts, is going to, and by the way, the worst of it hasn't even come into play yet, is going to throw countless people off of their food assistance, which is roughly about $2 per person per meal. And so, I apologize for asking these questions, but I don't know when else we're going to ask them, because I have no confidence that the amendments that I think might address these issues are going to be made in order. Ms. Craig, do you have anything you want to add?
I would simply add that, 176,211 people in Pennsylvania have already been kicked off SNAP after HR 1 passed. And so I just think that to say that no one's lost their benefits is just not intellectually honest.
Yeah, and I could just say you can't be healthy
Talking
if you
about
are hungry.
Pennsylvania, can I reply to
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
Mr. Ranking Member? Well, first of all, statistics can be manipulated. How many of those individuals, and I guess you
I
have
do
all-
town halls. I don't know if you do, and I talk to people who lost their benefits.
Mr. McGovern,
I'm
Mr.
trying to
McGovern.
reply. Trying to reply. I mean, the question is, how many of those folks are no longer receiving SNAP because they've achieved greater opportunity by engaging in that 20 hours of SNAP employment and career and technical education that we pay for. And this bill actually provides additional
Worker training
resources
programs are
to
terribly
states
underfunded.
Should their error rate,
Mr. McGovern,
should their error rate be above 6%? The fact is, I guess I have more confidence in our states than perhaps you do.
Well, they're
Every state, every
and I
state
reclaim
out
my
there
time,
has had an
Mr.
error
Chairman.
rate less than 6%.
The governors, including Republican
past 10
governors, are
years.
asking for more time. That's what they're asking for. It's not just Democratic governors, Republican governors, because they know what's about to hit them. And you know what, and what just makes me furious is the fact that, we can't get anybody, in leadership on this side to care about the fact that we got over 40 million people in this country who are hungry, who don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And by the way, there's a cost associated with that. Hungry people are not healthy people. They end up in emergency rooms. Kids who are hungry don't learn at school. There is a cost to that.
Mr. McGovern.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll be cut off and but I will say this is a lousy bill and shame on my Republican friends for bringing this bill to the House floor. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Fishbach, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, before I begin, I just wanted to ask maybe to remind the audience about the decorum that we are asking for. And because there were a few loud, and I won't say shouts, they were not shouts, but.
Okay. Let me just say, Mr. McGovern, when you ask a question, you need to let the witnesses respond to the questions. And also, you'd have plenty of time to ask questions and get an answer if you did not premise everything with many comments. So I would urge my Democrat colleagues and my Republican colleagues not to make statements before you're asking your questions, but to stick to the questions.
Well, Madam Chair, if I could just say to you in response, I asked for questions like how many veterans, lost their benefits in Pennsylvania. That's a pretty specific question. And so I never got any of the answers to any of those
But
questions.
before Mr. Thompson had a chance to answer, you interrupted him.
Well,
So
I never got an answer. to any of those
let the
questions.
record show.
Let the
Madam
record
Chair,
show.
Madam Chair, I'm not, I believe it's my time,
It's
actually.
Mr.
I
Fishbach.
can ask the
I believe
questions
it's
any
my
way I
time.
want, Madam Chair.
I'm reclaiming my
You
time.
know what?
I'm reclaiming
You
my
can,
time.
but don't ask for more time.
I'm reclaiming my time. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Ms.
much.
Fishbach.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to ask any gotcha questions. I don't want to play election year politics with the Farm Bill. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to thank Chairman Thompson for not only the Farm Bill that he's bringing forward, but all of the good things you did in the previous bills that we had last year. We got reforms on crop insurance. We got tax breaks for farmers in various ways. We did the estate exemption, the estate tax exemption. And so, I don't remember if on that you had help from any of the Democrats on the Ag Committee, but I know that there were Democrats who voted for this Farm Bill going out of that committee. So there is good in this bill. And so I think, and just so you know, most people know I represent a rural area, and farmers have their challenges right now. And they have called me in support of this bill. I have been getting calls supporting this bill. And like I said, bipartisanly passed out of committee. And I'm happy that Chairman Thompson saw fit to including my investing in rural America. That will help farmers. It will help rural America get more capital into our rural communities. And I'm very excited about this. So there are great things in this bill. And I understand the Democrats are playing election year politics with it, but in sincerity, there is a lot of positive things in this bill. And it shocks me when it becomes this partisan politics, having to ask the chairman gotcha questions so that you can trip him up somehow, instead of asking legitimate questions and having legitimate conversation. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you both for being here, sincerely. And I thank you, Chairman Thompson, for all of your hard work. I know that you're supportive of the farmers, the ag industry, the rural. It's in your heart. And I think that you're bringing forward a bill, including all the stuff that was done in the previous bills last year, that's incredibly important to the industry. And I appreciate you bringing the bill forward, and I want to do anything I can to help get this over the finish line, and I support it fully. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Fishbach. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
I'd first yield some time to the ranking member.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this point, but I do want the record to reflect that when we were debating the Affordable Care Act, I was the chair of this committee, and my dear friend from North Carolina went on for nearly an hour, and I did not interrupt her. And to the gentlelady who just spoke, I'm sorry that you think this is election year politicking to talk about whether or not we are protecting people from getting cancer, or whether or not we have the people in this country are losing their food benefits. I got to tell you, that's people are really worried about what is happening in this country, and we're going to. I have letters here from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and from FRAC, the Food Research Action Center. I get a gazillion letters here from a lot of health organizations, a lot of agriculture organizations, environmental organizations that are all opposed to this bill. So don't say this is election year politicking when we are asking questions about people losing their food assistance, or when we're asking questions about the health and safety of farm workers. Well, I'm sorry, it's my time as the gentlelady, because gotcha. No, because I want to point out how ridiculous this whole process is and how insensitive this process is to what people have on their minds back home. And you can support this bill if you want, but I think the process is a disgrace. I thank the gentlelady for yielding.
Thank you. And thank you to our folks from the Ag Committee who are testifying here today. It has been a very long 8 years since Congress passed the Farm Bill through regular order. For decades, the Farm Bill stood as one of the last true bipartisan achievements here in Congress. But in the last few years, we've seen it having to rely on a series of short-term extensions. And then last summer, Republicans didn't just delay the Ag Bill, they blew it up altogether with the Big Ugly Bill, in which they passed the largest SNAP cuts in our nation's history, ripping away $187 billion in food assistance. And all of us are seeing the impact of that in our states, in our districts. So it wasn't work requirements, it was paperwork requirements that were imposed in that Big Ugly Bill. It eliminated food aid eligibility for all but a narrow class of immigrants, ripping food assistance away from people fleeing violence, survivors of trafficking, and legal residents contributing to our economy. The cuts have already cut 3 million people off of SNAP. In Pennsylvania, more than 170,000 people have lost SNAP since July. And those numbers don't include those who are going to lose the benefits due to paperwork, not due to lack of eligibility. So the cuts are now projected to lead to 70,000 preventable deaths, people who will go hungry because of the choices that were made in that Big Ugly Bill. And why? Well, to pay for tax breaks that overwhelmingly benefit the richest 1% in America. So this Farm Bill, one of the biggest objections to it is that it locks in these cruel SNAP cuts, leaving Americans in every corner of the country without the support they need. And it leaves our states scrambling to figure out how they're going to pay for significant portions of the SNAP program that they've never had to fund before. There's no system in place for this, no infrastructure to rely upon. In our state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has to find more than $600 million per year, thanks to this new unfunded mandate. Congress has told our governors and state legislatures to just figure it out, but where is that money supposed to come from? Our states are going to have to make decisions like cutting SNAP further, raising taxes on working families, and gutting investments in education, healthcare, and public safety. Bipartisan governors across the country have warned that this cost shift could break the SNAP program entirely. And this Farm Bill drastically fails to meet the moment that's facing American families. It not only hurts farmers and families, but it provides a historic bailout for corporations. On top of everything, this legislation shields multi-billion-dollar chemical companies from accountability when their products make people sick. This provision would give legal immunity to the manufacturers of nearly 57,000 pesticides And we're talking about products that have already been linked to cancer, to Parkinson's disease, products that have been used without warnings or appropriate protections on farms, in schools, and in homes across the country. And this bill says that if you're harmed by those products, you're not going to have the right to go to court and seek justice or compensation. This provision doesn't just tilt the scales, it wipes them out entirely. It hands power to corporate chemical companies and tells Americans you're on your own. So I don't think this farm bill is striking the right balance. It leaves Americans hungry, it leaves our states without the support they need, and it frees billionaire corporations from accountability. Ranking Member Craig, we have heard our Republican colleagues dismiss the concern that this farm bill is going to force our states to pay millions more just to implement SNAP. Can you explain what accountability measures exist in the SNAP program and why what this bill would do is going to be such a burden?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Look, at the end of the day, this was a cost shift to the states, and in many cases, the states are simply not going to have the resources available to be able to pay for those SNAP benefits. When you think about the fact that these are based on error rates, remember that error rates are calculated by both underpayment and overpayment in our system. Bless you, Chairwoman. And at the end of the day, what's stunning is in many of our states, I believe it's 10, Minnesota is one of them, that actually the cost goes to the county. So in states like Minnesota, we're already seeing the tax levies go up. In fact, what we've done is we have pushed a complete increase in taxes to our local residents. You know, the SNAP quality control is what you're getting at. And of course, states randomly select approved cases each month and conduct detailed reassessments of eligibility and benefit determinations. And of course, USDA FNS independently re-reviews a subsample to validate those state findings and combines both sets of results to calculate the state and national error rates. Those error rates don't measure when benefits are improperly denied, timeliness of case processing, or program abuse. USDA requires states with higher error rates to submit a corrective action plan. And of course, in many instances, USDA will penalize states with those high error rates. In fact, Pennsylvania was sanctioned nearly $40 million for its high error rates in fiscal year 2023. So I would submit to you that those robust quality control measures already exist within this program, and they will continue to exist.
Yeah, and it is obviously of great concern that the burden is going to fall on taxpayers. The burden is going to fall on people who are already hungry. Rather than shoring up a system, it could collapse it entirely. Thank you for your testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as I listen to all of the problems that those of you from poorly run states have, I'm just thankful that I have a governor in the state of Georgia and Brian Kemp in a state legislature that's cutting taxes, has massive surpluses, and believes in freedom. And so I would encourage you to select leadership in your states that do the same thing, because the state of Georgia's got tremendous surpluses. Of course, we didn't shut down our economies during COVID. GT, a lot of charges have been made here. I want to go to two of them. One is the accusation was made that the 2026 Farm Bill cuts funding from EQIP. My understanding is that EQIP gets a 54% increase in baseline funding from the 18 Farm Bill base. Is that correct?
That is correct. Most of the education or conservation programs get a significant investment. We raised the baseline of investment overall in conservation by 24%, but specifically EQIP went to 54%. We had to park some money just because the rules of budget reconciliation with EQIP, and then those were used to actually today create some new conservation programs that are very bipartisan, by the way.
And there's certain rules around here, rules that even to those of us in Congress don't make any sense. And, E85 was brought up. The ranking member knows that the Ag Committee doesn't have jurisdiction over that. Does the Ag Committee have jurisdiction over
E15,
E15? I apologize.
same math, just backwards.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. No, that's, I think everyone, every member of Congress in this room knows that that is energy and commerce.
That's
I'm
right.
very supportive of year-round E15. I actually think it's a good policy for everyone, including the petroleum industry. And I represent the very first oil well anywhere in the world, 1859.
We don't have jurisdiction over trade
don't.
either, do we, Chairman?
We don't, but we have programs in the market access program
That's
and the
exactly
farm market
right.
development program that we have made investments in. We doubled those.
That's right.
And so as either in existing markets or as new markets open up, which we're seeing that happen, farmers will be equipped with additional, and it wasn't just those two. There was probably 3 or 4 different trade assistance programs that we've increased. And why did we do that? Because when we traveled the country, and it was just me, we did this in a bipartisan way, all around the country. That's what our farmers told us. That's what they needed.
I did see something in the committee that I got to tell you, I think it's probably the first time I've seen in my 30 years in office, in half at the state and half here, and where you were attacked for, as the Republican chair of the committee, you were attacked by the ranking member for accepting a Democrat amendment. And do you remember that?
Yeah,
I mean, a little disingenuous, I thought, as are the accusations on the SNAP related issues. And I want to read to you, and if you would, Chairman, just tell me if I'm reading correctly the actual law. And these are the exceptions to the work requirements. Obviously, there's the 20-hour exceptions to the work requirements that we know about, but I want to get into the specific exemptions. If you're under 18 or over 65 years of age, you're exempt from the work requirements, correct?
That's correct.
If you're medically certified as physically or mentally unfit for employment, you're exempt.
That's correct.
If you're a parent or other member of a household with responsibility for a dependent child under 14 years of age, you're exempt.
That's correct. And you can fulfill the 20 hours, average of 20 hours a week of education through online education.
If you're a pregnant woman, you're exempt from the changes that we made.
That's correct.
So there's a long list of exemptions to the changes that we made that the Democrats know are there that they refuse to acknowledge. And they just flat out misrepresenting the facts. And so, as for glyphosate, I will tell you, I believe it's safe. Other people might believe it's not, but I'm going to buy a 2.5-gallon jug of it when I get home, and I'm going to use it over the weekend. My wife uses it around the pool to spray for weeds. I'm going to use it around the lake, as well as some other chemicals as well in the yard. And we need herbicides and we need pesticides. And I've got just a few seconds left, Chairman. I think you've done a wonderful job of this. It was done in a bipartisan manner, even with the ranking member doing everything she could to stop her people from voting for it. You got 7 Democrats on the committee that actually studied the issues to vote for the bill. Any final things that you would like to say before I turn it back over to the chair?
Well, just there's an accusation that we've undermined the SNAP safety net, and that couldn't be further from the truth. In the Farm Food and National Security Act 2026, we strengthened SNAP by, number one, cracking down on criminals who swipe benefits from EBT cards. We increase access to SNAP nutrition incentive programs, specifically proteins, in addition to the fruits and vegetables, and dairy. We've added not just fluid milk, but cheeses and low sugar yogurts. And then finally, we make SNAP online purchasing a permanent option nationwide. Those are just 3 of really the enhancements within this bill.
You've been a good chair. You're an honorable member. You did a good job. And Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over. But ma'am, I'm sorry you didn't let me smile for your picture.
Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to yield just a few seconds to the ranking member.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I won't belabor this, but every time we talk about the pesticide liability shield, our distinguished chairman shakes his head like it doesn't exist. To those who are watching, go to section 10205 of the Republican Farm Bill, and you'll know what I'm talking about. The other thing I just want to point out for the record, because I think we need to be clear on this, when we're told that, oh, this bill just represents a very limited, the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee, there are provisions in this bill, Mr. Scott, just so you know, that fall under the jurisdiction of Energy and Commerce, Ed and Labor, Resources Oversight, Foreign Affairs, T&I, I'm sure I'm missing, what, finance? And science. So the idea that somehow we can't possibly, consider these other measures because we have this strict liability restriction, it's just not the case. And then the final thing I just want to say about the work requirements, the work requirements of the big ugly bill are nothing more than bludgeoning poor people with paperwork requirements. People are losing their benefits as we speak. I mean, I hear from them all the time. States offices are being overwhelmed with calls from people who are losing their benefits. This is a real crisis. Again, if you have people who are hungry, they cannot be healthy. And I thank the gentleman for yielding the time.
I thank the ranking member, certainly concur in his assessment. Good afternoon to the ranking member, Chairman. Thank you both for being here and for your testimony. Chairman, are you familiar with a place called Stearns County in Minnesota? That ring a bell, Mr. Chairman? All right. Yeah. I know the ranking member is very familiar with Stearns County. I was curious if it exists. The ranking member can attest to that. I regret that our colleague from Minnesota isn't here because she leveled a series of attacks against our ranking member here about electioneering and the like. Stearns County is in her district. It's a Republican county. This is a county that voted for President Trump. Now, I'm reading here from the National Associations of Counties publication. Let me just read this to you. The goal of a farm bill is to support rural communities and give them the resources they need to thrive, said a Stearns County, Minnesota commissioner. But without addressing H.R. 1's changes to SNAP and Medicaid, that can't be fulfilled. That's what this Stearns County commissioner said. Quote, whether it is food and nutrition and being able to have a community that is able to keep a grocery store or have those kinds of resources going back to the community, being able to have a doctor or telemedicine. If we don't have those components, it is very difficult to see how many of our communities can afford to survive, let alone thrive. Now, this county is the largest milk producing county in the state of Minnesota. But again, we'll quote here. With inflation right now, with rising grocery prices, it's not translated into more money for our farmers. It's translated into more costs for the people who really need SNAP. And that means it's also translated into bigger problems for our grocery stores. If the federal government is going to mandate changes, states and counties should be equipped with the resources to comply with them. These extra costs in our state right now, it's looking like it could be an increase in county property taxes just to comply with what the federal law is. And that shouldn't happen. This is a county commissioner in a Republican county, a county that President Trump won decisively, that happens to be represented by a Republican member of this Rules Committee. Not electioneering, Mr. Chairman. Not electioneering.
It's the term.
No, I know you didn't. But I wish again that my colleague, she's not here. She used it. I'm not accusing you, Mr. Chairman, of using it. But I think it is regrettable that we can't have a reasoned debate and conversation about this bill. And the many reasons why the ranking member, myself, the ranking member of this committee, and folks on my side of the aisle have legitimate concerns with it. So again, not accusing you of doing that, Mr. Chairman, but I want for the record at least, and perhaps our colleague from Minnesota, when she joins us, she can educate us about Stearns County and why her constituents apparently don't support this farm bill. In any event, I will just say, I know you know this, Mr. Chairman, rural America right now is struggling. I represent a district that's rural in nature. A lot of farms, a lot of ranches, they're struggling. How many farms filed for bankruptcy last year? Do you know?
Way too many from the inflation that started and has continued, unfortunately, for the past 5-6 years.
Well, as I understand it, 315 filings for bankruptcy last year. That is a 46% increase from 2024.
All the more reason we need to pass this bill.
Well, we'll talk a bit about the many reasons why I don't believe this bill is going to ultimately alleviate the crisis that is hitting rural America and farms in small towns across
Well, if
the
I-
state of Colorado,
if-
including my own.
if I-
I've got limited time. I know the chairwoman, given, the experience that the ranking member had, I want to preserve my ability to get into a
That's
very
fine. I'd be
important
glad to
issue.
address
So,
Stearns County if you'd like, but
I will
you go
perhaps
ahead.
when Ms. Fishbach returns, she can, she can pose a question.
Because folks
County.
in Stearns County are going to love this farm bill.
Well, that's not what they're telling us in this article, Mr. Chairman.
That
This
is one person that wrote an article.
This is the
I have
National,
spent a lot of time in
this is the
Minnesota.
National Association of Counties. So
Yeah.
in any event, I have some questions about pesticides. So I want to follow up on a point that the ranking member made. I'll wait until, is that, just want to make sure you've, okay. You earlier took great umbrage when the ranking member suggested that this bill includes a liability shield for pesticide manufacturers. So you disagree? You don't believe that this bill includes a liability shield?
My response was conditional, was there is no liability shield if there's a bad actor that is being dishonest to the EPA, that is misleading the EPA in terms of the chemicals that are put forward, that these bad actors can be sued.
Okay.
Now, if they're following the science, and then again, a lot of this is a difference between emotion and science. If you're following the science and the science is complete, and the manufacturer is
Okay.
being honest, with what they're submitting
So help,
to the EPA that goes on the label, because
help me understand.
this is a labeling
Mr. Chairman, you answered the question. Okay.
issue.
So in your view, this bill does not include a liability shield for pesticide manufacturers, right?
Not for bad actors. that
Okay, so let me
mislead
read to you this
EPA.
language. This is from your bill. Quote, "To prohibit any state instrumentality or political subdivision thereof, or a court from directly or indirectly imposing or continuing in effect any requirements for, or penalize, or hold liable any entity for failing to comply with requirements that would require labeling or packaging that is in addition to or different from the labeling or packaging approved by the administrator of the EPA." It is a liability shield by the plain language of the statute.
Not if
Correct. If they're complying with the EPA
If they are
standards,
in compliance
they get
with
liability
EPA and
shields.
standards, there's nothing to sue about at that point because the science is proven.
I got it. So then if that's the case, what in the world motivated Bayer to propose a settlement of $7.25 billion for hundreds of thousands of claims that are being litigated 1 mile from here at the United States Supreme Court today in real time?
Yeah, could you read the last sentence of that paragraph? You left the last sentence off of that paragraph.
I just read it to you.
Yeah, but the last sentence you.
Yes, provided that the entity is not in material violation of that subparagraph of the labeling requirements.
Exactly, and I can't speak to what decision that Bayer
Oh,
made.
okay. So
In terms of making that award, I don't know.
So you legitimately, I think, I want to make sure I understand this. You are in good faith arguing that this provision has nothing to do with the $1 billion settlement that Bayer has proposed with litigants, that this provision has nothing to do with the Supreme Court case that's pending right now that was heard today?
Not for me personally, no, it isn't.
Not
This
for
is
you
about-
personally?
This is about providing what the farmers are asking for, what the farmers need.
Sir,
And quite frankly, what
Bayer,
the provisions that are there.
why do you think Bayer spent $2 million in the last 3 months lobbying on this bill? What do you think motivated them?
You know, you bring
Can't explain it. Just, no explanation.
Yeah.
They're just really interested in your farm bill. That's why they've identified this.
We've worked hard on this
bill.
provision for several years,
Oh, I
looking
know.
at what we heard from our farmers that our farmers need. We wanted to make sure that if there's bad actors out there that are not in compliance with the labeling standards and providing the EPA the proper information to apply to the label, that those individuals can be sued. They can be put out of business.
The point is that these failure to warn cases that have percolated across the country in which juries in liberal communities and conservative communities, including in the state of Missouri, have said that the plaintiffs in those cases merit relief and redress for the harm that was caused. Those failure to warn cases would all end if this provision became law. Bayer has publicly said that if the Supreme Court decision goes their way, or if this language that you've written is enacted, it's gone. They don't have to worry about failure to warn cases anywhere in the country. Now, I think the frustrating part for me, and I suspect the ranking member, is that there are other colleagues of yours who would say, yes, that's exactly what we want. That's what we're trying to do. We've crafted language that creates an immunity shield. It's a liability shield for the pesticide manufacturer that ultimately, if they're in compliance with the EPA standard, they should not be held liable in a single court in the United States of America.
And I
just wish
I
that
would
you
argue
engage
that what
with
we're
me
talking
intellectually on
about
that.
is proper warning. I mean, if you want the alternative, that's fine. If you want 50 different states that are able to do their own labeling, I would argue that I doubt if the majority, and I'm not going to ask you this as a gotcha question.
Sure.
Those are ridiculous.
Yeah, that's all right.
But I'm going to argue, I would say that certainly less than 50% of states actually have a toxicologist on
Sure.
staff.
You know who made
But
that
if you
argument
want
today?
the labeling done with 50 different states and complying with 50 different states,
Hey, Madam Chair.
it's going to raise the cost of affordability for that compliance.
I hear you.
And I think it's going to put people at more risk.
And that's an argument you can make on the merits, and I appreciate this discussion.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you, a lawyer made that argument today during the Supreme Court's oral arguments. And Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice, responded. And his response was, you know what? Maybe it's not a bad thing. In fact, I'm butchering his words here. If states and juries across the country have an opportunity to sound the alarm if the federal government got it wrong. That's the point here. And
Well-
so I would just tell you, and by the way, I mean.
And states do have the ability not to register
Maybe
one
you
of these tools if they.
maybe you have an answer to
license
this
plate
last
or
question.
whatever.
One last
They
question.
still have the rights to
I hear.
have
I hear.
ultimate control.
I would have to a longer conversation because I disagree with your argument on that front, but
I
anyway,
only
we'll
argue
agree
on
to
the
disagree.
facts.
You're aware that a couple of years ago, Bayer removed glyphosate from residential products. You familiar with that?
Yes.
Why?
I guess there were questions.
If it's so safe, why'd they do that?
I don't know.
Don't know.
I will tell you, it created a real challenge for.
There are
farmers
Republicans who oppose this
to be able
provision.
to have
There are
food
Democrats who
affordability.
oppose this provision. I am one of them, and I hope that enough Republican members of the U.S. House tomorrow decide in advance of the procedural vote that this amendment is worth fighting for, and they ultimately ensure that we get an up or down vote.
I hope there's
on the
enough that
merits.
believe in science.
I
That's
yield
all
back.
I hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Roy, you're recognized.
Well, I thank the chairman and the ranking member. Thank you all for your time today. A lot of this has been covered, so I don't want to repeat it. I think I would like to give the chairman first just the ability to respond or clean up anything, if anything, in that exchange with the previous member.
I appreciate that. First of all, when it comes to Stearns County, and I don't think I've been there, but I've been in Minnesota a lot, and I don't always know what county I'm in. I apologize for that, Angie. Yeah. But I will say some of this that they're incurring, you got to talk to Governor Waltz on. I think the folks in, I don't know who the guy, which county commissioner wrote this article that's being referenced. But quite frankly, these are things I heard that were, if you want better improvements to telemedicine, you're going to want the Farm Food and National Security Act because it's in the economic development title of rural broadband, high-speed rural broadband, and specifically we address telemedicine. If you want more grocery stores, we have programs that will help individuals seek to open up new grocery stores. And we do have food deserts in our rural communities and a lot of them, but we have provisions in this farm bill that would help to provide that. I respect the fact that Minnesota's got some really good dairy like Pennsylvania does and a lot of other states. This is probably the best dairy farm bill that we've ever had in terms of milk and dairy policy. Ties over to nutrition in terms of dairy incentives, fluid milk, cheeses, low sugar yogurt. There's some charges out there that I've been told that, folks who just, they say that new data shows that SNAP participation nationwide has fallen by 2.5 million people because of the cuts in HR 1. The fact is that data is being cited for the sole purpose of fear mongering. Only Democrats would condemn the fact that people are no longer dependent on the government. And it's not just we've heard rantings over average of 20 hours per week for SNAP employment, career and technical education. If somebody leads the nation on career and technical education, I'm kind of partial to that. I love that pathway. That's called climbing your way up the ladder of opportunity. But you can also satisfy it by doing 20 hours of volunteer work if need be, or 20 hours of work. And we do have a lot of working poor, people that are working an average of 20 hours. Everybody's going to, based on finances, is going to be eligible for SNAP for 3 months. What we're talking about is the question of, will they continue after 3 months? HR 1 ensured 2 groups of individuals are not receiving SNAP. And I don't apologize for that. Illegal aliens first. They're never meant to receive these benefits for and then able-bodied adults age 18 to 64 without young children who are not working, training or volunteering for at least 20 hours a week. And you know what? That's not something new. That requirement to some degree has been around for a very long time and has not been the end of the world. We want to give people an opportunity. This is how you can earn the opportunity to continue to receive SNAP after your first 3 months. And so I'll just stop with those two. Mr. Roy, I appreciate the opportunity to clarify those.
Yeah, I wanted to give you some time on that. And then, and I want to be mindful of the clock as well, generally. Just a couple things. I think there's some things that should be lauded in this bill. You've mentioned it. It reflects the good work that we did last summer in trying to tighten how SNAP benefits go out, particularly for those people who are here illegally. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that we're trying to carry out and perpetuate that. There, I think, were other decent reforms that we had. And I think, it's important to note this thing that you mentioned, Congressman Massey's Prime Act and having at least a test program for that, and some other things that are really, I think, critically important. So I applaud that. I think there were some provisions in there that restricts or allows the Secretary of Ag to restrict solar projects that would potentially, roll over farmland. I think we need to be looking at that in a significant way. I think the extent to which we're covering up valuable farmland with solar panels is something we should be taking a long, hard look at. So that's good. There are other things in there that are good. I think I will have to acknowledge some concerns that I think merit, and that's why I wanted to give you time to respond favorably. I do, like, as I listen to and I look at what's happening with the Supreme Court arguments happening at the moment, and one issue in particular, right, is just a straight up issue for states being able to make decisions for themselves. And the people of Texas that I represent, that I might hope to represent in a different capacity that would be actually directly on point, is the ability for the state of Texas to make decisions for the state of Texas. That is true for this issue with respect to labeling and dealing with the issues where we've got great concerns. But look, I'm a cancer survivor. I think there's a significant amount of data that raises big concerns. And I think big ag needs to be body checked. And I think big ag, like big healthcare, like big tech, are all way too full of themselves. And I'm a pretty equal opportunity bashers of large corporate America these days. And I just think in this case, I've got some big concerns about a section that steps over at a minimum. And by the way, this is true as we look at AI and preemption. I don't want to preempt the ability of the state of Texas to be able to say what's right with respect to artificial intelligence. I don't want to preempt the state of Texas and our right and be able to deal on a lot of healthcare fronts, but we're not able to go push back on big healthcare. I do have to acknowledge having a concern on this point that I think does merit our consideration as a committee with respect to making amendments in order. That labeling issue is very real. And the people that I represent in Texas are raising that issue and saying that states ought to have the ability to manage and deal with that. So, that is a concern. I think there are other things that I wish we were addressing here and going further with respect to foreign nationals buying up American land. I think we could go further on that, foreign adversaries in particular. There are things that are missing, but that's different. Missing is just things you wish we were doing.
Yeah.
But with respect to the provisions in here, those are in fact concerning, and I think worthy of discussion and potential amendment.
Sure.
The chairman want to respond, and then I'll bring it
Yeah,
back.
please. Actually, we have strong provisions in here about foreign entities from many perspectives. One of them is making sure that the Secretary of Agriculture is on the CFIUS committee. But at the same time, there are other provisions in there, making sure that, protecting our national security from foreign entities buying up both agriculture production and processing. Because quite frankly, if you want to be able to manipulate and control a country, control the food supply. And we've already had, this is not the first time. Back in the 70s, I'm told, my research shows, that Japan was a real threat. Small island, densely populated, unable to feed itself. And so a lot of states back then, South Dakota was one, Pennsylvania, I'm sure there are a lot of others, they put their own state provisions in terms of protecting the purchase of those from foreign entities. We're putting that for the nation, and it's in this farm bill. I was just reviewing those provisions this morning. And then in terms of labeling, we want to protect states' rights. We think that that's really important. And so if the state wants to go and have something that is specific to their state, maybe it's based on the ecology of their state or whatever it might be, they just have to submit it to the EPA, and the EPA will add it into the labeling. So the states would be able to express themselves in terms of specific in their states. And then let me just say, if all that is unsatisfactory to the state of Texas or any state, they have the ability not to register that chemical to be used in their state. They can ban it from their state under the provisions that we have within this farm bill.
Well, I appreciate the chairman. We're well over time, but I wanted to give you plenty of time. I'll just conclude by saying, like AI, like other areas of law, I do not like for the state of Texas to have to come to the EPA to beg for the ability to go further to protect their people. We're 31 million people. We're the 8th biggest economy in the world. I frankly think we can do whatever the hell we want to do on most things, and should be able to do whatever the hell we want to do on most things. So that's kind of my starting place. And so I just kind of want to figure that out because I've got grave concerns about big ag making decisions in the corporate interest that aren't necessarily in the interest of every consumer and the health and well-being of every American. So with that, I will yield back to the chairwoman.
I appreciate that. And let me just say, when you look at whatever big ag is, they have the economy of scale to deal with whatever comes along. I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm little ag. And we have a lot of states that are little ag. They don't have the ability. They don't have that economy of scale to be able to deal with those.
I thank the chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Mr. Norman, you're recognized.
We're well over time. I'll be brief, but thank you for your work on this, Chairman. As it relates to the illegals that are have caused the SNAP provisions, people that are claiming it to jump, 19%, I've heard much higher, and the cost has jumped as well. What kind of enforcement mechanisms do we have?
Well, making it really clear to the states who are responsible to enforce that. Now, some states will claim that they don't have as access to the kind of qualified individuals to do that. But we have a provision within this farm bill that if a state would choose to do it, they're not forced to do it, but a state could work with a contract service, above and beyond their employees that they have. So they have adequate workforce, to make sure that they that they can process. If their error rate's above 6%, they're eligible to use that. There's a few other provision that makes them eligible to use those additional resources. And so that's the whole point of the error rate issue that we put into effect. The farm bills in the past and the provisions I think of SNAP have been pretty good. But the problem is when it gets down to the states. My own state of Pennsylvania 2 years ago was an 18% error rate. It was unacceptable. Then it went to 11%, and now they're working to get it below 6%. Every state in the past 10 years has had an error rate less than 6%. That's why because some error rates are just paperwork errors. Somebody didn't fill in the right line, missed the information. So that's why we didn't go 0 in the end. We put the threshold at 6% and to get it under 6%. And if they do that, we're not talking about any additional money that they have to pay. But what we're talking about is a better, well-administered program that serves everybody, including the beneficiaries. An error rate would be counted as an underpayment. And we get that, right? You get a family that EBT card is not loaded up with the resources that it should have for a given month. And so it doesn't stretch as far. That's an error rate. That's wrong. An error rate could be an overpayment. And you wonder, well, how is that a bad thing? People get more than what they need. Well, that's because the states do come back. It may be 6 months from then, and they take money away to make up the difference. And so you're a family that shows up at a grocery store. You're going to use your 2 or 3 forms of payment, one of those being an EBT card. And you go to use your EBT card, and it's not near the amount of money that you thought should be on there. And so that's why it's so important to get this right for the people that are beneficiaries. And I will say, I get it. If a state's really screwing up, they're going to pay more money. But as my friends on this side of the aisle already pointed out, they're already paying more money when they screw up because they get fines. They get fines by the USDA. I forget the amount of money that Pennsylvania had to pay for an 18% error rate. It was just, $40 million. Thank you. And it's a significant amount of money. So we're just adjusting this so that in the end, we set the expectation to get it right. There's an old adage out there, right? If you're spending somebody else's money, you're not as careful as if you're spending your own money. And we've seen that in the administration of this program. And so I look forward to the fact that we're making this program better. And the other thing I want to say is we've not cut anybody. Now, there's people that come off of SNAP, obviously. A lot of people, I hope, that work their way off of SNAP. Where they don't need it anymore because they've been able to climb the ladder of opportunity. But we've not cut any individual benefits. And I will say, even OMB and others questioned what President Biden did, under Secretary Vilsack of increasing benefits. They didn't use the proper formula that they should have always used. So there were probably grounds to do that, but it's not something I would do once families have come to rely on that type of assistance. So we did not cut anybody's individual benefits that they get. I think Mr. McGovern does a great job of tracking that number, somewhere around $2 per meal
that's it.
per day.
Prevents it from going up.
Yeah, and we didn't prevent that. Now going forward, it's going to be according to the existing law, which is based on the inflation of food, not buying green vegetables or green food or whatever the crazy stuff that happened under the Biden administration, but it will be based on the inflationary impact of food. And that should be the primary thing. Being able to afford food is an inflationary factor. So going forward, when this gets reevaluated, hopefully on a regular basis, they'll stick with that criterion, the inflationary impact on food.
Well, I hope the consequences are in place. And you mentioned the Biden administration. We wouldn't be having a lot of this problem if they didn't let 20 million illegals in this country and put them on every government program that there is in America. And now we're having to deal with the aftermath of it. But the 20 hours of work week, would you say that's more or less than the average American puts in? I will tell you this, it's a lot more. 20 hours is a lot less than the average American. I don't care whether you're
of working age.
And I know a lot of children who have chores have more than that. So anyway, thank you for your work, and I think we've debated this long enough. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. And I thank our witnesses from the Ag Committee for being here today, and you are excused.
Always a pleasure. Thanks so much to the ranking member and the chair and all the members of the committee.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm going to say something.
Gender is extremist, ignores basic biology, and is at odds with the vast majority of parents think. But it gets worse. Many school districts are actively pushing radical gender identity on our children and even encouraging children to transition genders without parental consent. According to Defending Education, at least 21,000 schools and 1,200 districts covering over 12 million students have policies that prevents faculty and staff from disclosing a student's gender identity to his or her parents without the student's permission. For example, in Los Angeles, school staffs are not required to notify parents of a gender transition if the school staff deems the parent not supportive. These policies are simply unacceptable. If a student is experiencing gender dysphoria, parents should be the first to know, not the last. Parents have a fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of their own children. As Heritage Foundation has written, the century of Supreme Court jurisprudence supports the notion that parents enjoy the fundamental constitutional right to direct the upbringing, health, and education of their children. Parents' consent is not a novel concept. Parental permission is required for many of the most mundane activities schools do. If parents' consent is required for something as basic as going to school, a school field trip, the school should never act to socially transition a student without the parents' knowledge. The Stopping Indoctrination and Protecting Children Act, Kids Act, combines two bills that we marked up in committee, Chairman Warburg's Protection Kid Act, H.R. 2016, and my Say No to Indoctrination Act, H.R. 2617. This combined bill will do two things. First, it will prohibit federal funds under the Elementary and School Education Act from being used to promote radical gender ideology as defined under President Trump's executive order on this subject. This policy codifies President Trump's executive order on gender ideology as it pertains to K through 12 education. Second, the bill would deter secret gender transition by prohibiting recipients of funds under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act from transitioning public elementary and middle school students without parents' consent. Parents must be involved in their children's education. The federal funds must not be used for indoctrination. Not too long ago, these ideas would have not been controversial. Today, however, too many schools want to cut parents out and teach radical ideology. It's time for us to put a stop to this nonsense. I want to thank the Rules Committee for considering this bill, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Fox, Ranking Member McGovern, and other members of the committee. I oppose H.R. 2616, the ill-named Stopping Indoctrination and Protecting Kids Act. So let me be clear about what the bill actually does, because the name bears no relationship to its contents. First, the bill requires schools to obtain parents' consent before anyone in the school can make changes in any form or provide any accommodations that affirm a child's gender identity. This would include requiring schools to obtain parental consent before honoring a child's request to be called by a particular name. Further, the bill would prohibit the use of federal funds to teach so-called gender ideology. I want to underscore this point. The parents' involvement in a child's education is essential, but this bill is not about improving parental involvement. It's about using the threat of federal funding to compel schools to out transgender and non-conforming children to their parents, whether or not doing so is safe for that child. Additionally, trying to block a teaching of so-called gender ideology, this bill seeks to control what our schools teach. This bill would prevent teachers from discussing topics that include trans or gender nonconforming people or even their existence. And let me just say that passing federal legislation won't make trans children disappear. They'll still be there, whether this bill passes or not. This not only affects the classroom and what teachers who are the best experts in helping our students learn, what the teachers can use to educate our students. It also affects schools and students in other ways, such as limiting the selection of books in school libraries. And let me just remind my Republican colleagues that the federal government does not control curriculum. It is well established in statute that states and districts determine their own curriculum without interference from the federal government. This bill takes away state and local control of education, the very thing that the current administration claims that we're giving back to the states by illegally dismantling the Department of Education. Worse, this bill causes real demonstrable harm. Research on this is not ambiguous. Study after study, from the Trevor Project to the American Academy of Pediatrics, from mental health professionals across the country, all research shows that transgender youth who are affirmed by adults in their lives have dramatically better mental health outcomes. They are less likely to experience depression and less likely to attempt suicide. That's not ideology, that's data. This bill is not a parents' rights legislation. It is a mandate that bullies vulnerable kids who are at risk for the sake of political gamesmanship. Proponents of this bill will say that parents have the right to know what is happening with their children in school. I agree. But this bill goes well beyond notification, a perfect example of federal overreach because it requires consent before a teacher can even use a student's preferred name on a form such as a seating chart. And this is all children. It brings the federal government into what could be an interaction between a student and their teacher, threatens the funding that schools depend on to serve all of the students if they fail to comply. I would note that what the bill does not do. It does not help students learn to read or close achievement gaps. It does not address teacher shortages. It does not improve school safety, mental health resources, or academic achievement. It does not even consider how to implement the bill if the Department of Education is in fact dismantled. While we face a genuine crisis in public education, the majority has brought this bill to us to consider. We should be asking ourselves who the legislation serves. It does not serve the students who came out to a trusted teacher because home is not safe. It does not serve school counselors who are trying to protect the confidentiality of a student who may be struggling. It does not serve teachers who work every day to create a classroom where every student can learn, but it does serve the political agenda that has decided that transgender children are convenient political targets. And what happens to a counselor when a counselor gets caught protecting the confidentiality of a student, then the whole school loses federal funding, no negotiation, no discussion, just loses federal money. Requiring parents to sign off anytime any student wants to be identified by another name, such as a nickname, is absurd. For example, my first name is Robert, but I prefer to be called Bobby. Notion that my teachers would have to obtain explicit consent from my parents before filling out a seating chart calling me Bobby rather than Robert would be a waste of time. And what if a teacher wants to call me Rob because there's another Bobby in the classroom? This would require teachers to go back to my parents to get consent again. And this is not unusual. In fact, most children, for most children, as they're trying to figure out their own identity, will experiment with different nicknames. Moreover, a school counselor who knows that a student is not safe at home or a student whose parents have been hostile or abusive, in those cases, the school would still be legally required to provide the notice as a condition for the school to receive federal funds. This bill makes no exception for student safety, none. It just says get parental consent, whether it makes sense or not, or lose your federal funding. It fails to consider any of these possibilities. The bill is unnecessary, potentially harmful, and I urge my colleagues to oppose the bill and instead take up legislation that actually improves the lives of children in our public schools. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I'm now going to go to the other Mr. Scott in the room to see if you have any questions.
Yes, ma'am. I don't understand any objection to the bill. We're talking about elementary school students and middle grade students, correct?
Right.
We're talking about minors. By definition, they would be minors. Young teenagers, if they're middle school.
Yes.
What would the oldest person that we're talking about in all likelihood be? Mr. Burgess? I'm sorry, Mr. Owens. 12, 13, 14?
Middle school.
14
Yeah.
at most? So we're talking about whether or not someone who is not the guardian of somebody who's under the age of 14 can change not facts, but can change documentation on official government forms? Well, since when do we think it's okay for someone who's not the guardian of a child to change their name in this country?
I gather you're asking.
Mr. Owens?
Okay, well, it's interesting. As I was listening to my colleague talk, I have a nickname in high school. My nickname was Doc. If I decided that I wanted to be called Sally, my parents would have loved to have known that.
Yeah.
And it would help me out a lot too, because end of the day, what it comes down to is it's all about trust. Trust the teacher and the parent.
Well,
and we start teaching our
I
kids how to
can't-
lie.
Look, you played football. You were much better at it than I was. But everybody on the football team has a nickname, right? We're not talking about someone's nickname on the football team, are we? We're talking about somebody's official name, correct? At the school system, we're talking about radicals in the school systems telling the parents what the name of their kid is and what the sex of their kid is.
Exactly.
According to them, not according to biology.
No, well, actually, that's not true, because it says it's all children, where it says covered children. You turn the page, covered children is everybody in the elementary school. So the entire football team, if you want to call them by nicknames on the football team, you got to get parental consent every time you use a different nickname.
I disagree.
Yes, sir. I don't
this
agree
is not
with the
about
assessment.
Yeah, this is not about nickname change. We're dealing with gender dysphoria. These are the issues we're talking about.
Well, that's what you're aiming at, but that's not what the bill says. The bill says, as a condition of receiving funds under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, a public school that receives funds under the act shall obtain parental consent before changing a covered student's gender markers, pronouns, or preferred name on any school form
Yes, sir, right there, if I may. since my time.
or sex-based accommodations. Okay.
There's no official school form on your nickname on the football or the basketball or the softball or the baseball.
Okay.
Look, this is,
You print the roster. You can write out the roster.
that's not an official school form. This is, look, this just shows the fact that we have to do this.
It's not official. It says school form, and a roster would be a school form. And wait a minute, and it's a covered student means who is an elementary school student or a student in any of the middle grades. That's all students, not just the trans
Madam
students.
Chair, I'm gonna just reclaim my time because we've got a lot of legislation before us. I think the fact that we're even having to discuss this and that this is even happening in the public school systems of our country today just shows how far this country has fallen in a multitude of ways. And it shows just how radical the people who control the Democratic primaries have become. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really wish that our Republican colleagues would take an interest in our public schools other than to dismantle them or to bully LGBTQ kids just to score points in the Republican culture wars. This bill falls in the latter category. I mean, the absolute last thing that Congress should be doing right now when Americans are faced with a rising cost of living crisis, rising gas prices, a misguided and unauthorized war in the Middle East, and an administration that has weaponized the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security for political purposes. The last thing we should be doing right now is micromanaging the pronoun policies of local school districts. When you say it out loud, it sounds insane because it is. All this acrimony while our schools crumble, while our education system lags behind our peers generally, globally, and while we fail to equip our students with the skills they need to succeed in the modern world, Republicans haven't done a damn thing to help our schools or our students. They've allowed the administration to gut the Department of Education. They have fired the federal employees overseeing assistance to rural and low-income schools and overseeing compliance with civil rights policies. And they've taken away SNAP from 3 million people, which has impacted school lunch eligibility in the process. These aren't the actions you take if you want our children or our schools to be successful. For years, House Democrats, and I know particularly Ranking Member Scott's committee, have been advocating for policies to fix our broken schools and provide every child in America with a good public education. And it's a goal that is within our reach. But Republicans are more interested in attacking trans kids than they are in helping all children get ahead. There's no greater example of this stunning lack of political will than the vast sums of money that have been wasted already on this war with Iran. We've burned through over $60 billion in 58 days that this war has been going on. That money could have fixed thousands of our nation's most needy schools. Instead, it's going to defense contractors. Or take as an example, the $140 billion blank check that the Republicans gave ICE and Border Patrol in their big ugly bill. That money, which is currently being used to terrorize American cities and American citizens, and to build massive detention centers instead of schools all across the country, that could have covered most of the estimated $150 billion needed to adequately fund every public school in America. Adding insult to injury, in the next panel that we get to have today, Republicans are teeing up another budget reconciliation measure to provide another $140 billion to ICE and Border Patrol. Americans don't want to see their taxpayer dollars wasted on this nonsense. How can Republicans be so eager to provide hundreds of billions of dollars for foreign wars and for ICE, but they can't spare a dime for America's kids? Ranking Member Scott, can you just try to help people remember the role of the federal government in our public schools?
Yes, the role of the federal government in public schools is basically a civil rights mandate to make sure that everyone has equal access to a quality education. That is when starting in 1954 with Brown v. Board of Education, coming up to 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act noticed that we're funding schools with the real estate tax, so they put giving low-income areas at a severe disadvantage, so Title I, money into low-income areas. We've got Children with Disabilities Education Act to make sure they get a good education. English as a second language. Eliminate achievement gaps to make sure that everyone has access to a good quality education. That has been the purpose, not teacher quality, not graduation requirements, not curriculum, but civil rights. And when they get rid of the Department of Education, they're getting rid of civil rights enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a couple decades as a school board member, as an education advocate, trying to make sure that we can assure a good public education to every kid. It goes back to our founding principles and some quotes that may or may not have come from Jefferson about an informed citizenship being necessary to our democracy. So it's really, really disheartening to see these attacks on public education, these attempts to micromanage issues that really are not first and foremost when you're dealing with schools like in Philadelphia, where the average age of the school is 60, 70, 80 years. There's no AC, there is asbestos. And we need help to make sure that every kid has the chance at a good education rather than trying to exclude some kids. So I thank you for your testimony and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Canlon. Mr. Jack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll also note, as many of my colleagues did earlier, want to offer my condolences to the family of Representative David Scott. He was my neighbor, represented Henry County, and certainly wish him well and certainly enjoyed hearing the many wonderful testimonies about his life. I want to thank our witnesses for testifying. And if I could open to Mr. Owens, a question to you. It seems like that this bill is really a codification of some of the campaign promises that we made in 2024 when voters across the country elected us to the majority and President Trump to the White House. Could you comment on that?
Yes, I think our country's ready for some common sense. I grew up at a time when this was not even close to a conversation we would have. We didn't know what the difference of boy and girl was. And I think it's important also to realize that we have 30% of our kids today, 8th grade, cannot read, write, and think. Here in DC, we'll spend probably more dollars per kid, zero proficiency in math in one district. So no, we have not been focused on the right things. And when we start dealing with wondering if we should have our kids thinking their parents are a threat, that they should lie to their parents, or they believe it's a stranger. A teacher is a stranger. Just a few hours a day, it does not make them a parent. And I think we'll now come back to common sense where most Americans get this. I don't think this is a conversation that majority of Americans on both sides of the aisle would agree with this idea that we can change from boy to girl and start teaching kids as early as the 7th and 8th grade that they should do that. So I think the timing it couldn't be any more perfect for us to have this conversation and to pass the bills that have been put to codify what the president's put in place with the executive orders.
Well said. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Well, I don't really know what to ask. I mean, I saw that this bill was scheduled today, and I've just done a series of town halls, and this issue has never been brought up. And I was on an airplane today from Boston to Washington. Two people pulled me aside to talk about the price of gas, but no one talked about this. I'm just wondering. I mean, when you do town halls at home and when you're listening to having constituent roundtables, or, I mean, is this what people are prioritizing?
I would say every family has watched their child go through taking the body parts off, or going through depression because they now want to go back to what's normal. Then those are the folks you're going to hear a lot from. And for those who've not experienced that, we have empathy. And we don't want other kids around.
I'll tell you what I do here when I go to schools, and I talk to young trans kids who many of them have feel like they're under attack by Washington and by politicians, and they're having a difficult time basically dealing with that because they just want to be who they are and they don't want to be judged and they don't want to be demonized, and they don't want to be the subject of, I mean, I don't know how many trans-related bills we have done in this Congress. It's a tie between bringing up bills dealing with trans kids and dealing with immigrants. It's every other week, it's a bill dealing with one of those two topics. Again, not about finding solutions, not about trying to help provide people support, but it's about demonizing people and tearing apart this country, further polarizing our country, and not dealing. Maybe it's a deliberate attempt so that we're not talking about affordability issues. But I got to tell you, I'm just like with all that people have talked to me about just this weekend. I'm like, that if I were to tell them that this is what we were doing this week, I mean, they would be like, what planet are you on? I mean, don't you understand what real people are going through in this country? People can't afford their groceries. They can't afford, the price of gas. Our farmers are being hurt by these tariffs. And, anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. Mr. Scott.
Yeah, well, and when they talk about education, this isn't what they talk about.
Right.
They talk about the old school buildings. They talk about a lack of achievement, talk about anything. As far as this issue is concerned, of course, parents should be informed. In the vast majority of the cases, that's the best thing. The problem with this bill is it's one size fits all. You have to notify the parents whether it makes any sense or not, whether or not you know you're endangering the children. And in addition to that, if you just read the bill, it's ridiculous because it says that you're changing preferred name on any school form. If you publish a roster, when I was in elementary school and said Bobby Scott's playing second base, that's a school form that would, once they discover that, the school would lose federal funds because they've changed my name without getting parental consent. And if you, in effect, you'd only really do this for trans children, which means your disparate impact based on sex, which is a violation of Title IX. So I don't know how either you apply it to everybody or you don't apply it to anybody. But it's absolutely, just read the words of the bill. It's just absurd on its face.
No, and I appreciate that. I'll just say one final thing. At one of my town halls, somebody brought up the fact that, we've already spent over $60 billion on this war in Iran, over $60 billion. None of it paid for, but we already said $60 billion. And the follow-up to that statement was, how many schools could we build in this country? How many hospitals could we build in this country? How many kids could we help afford college with that money? And we're nowhere near finished yet.
And you're nowhere near finished yet because a lot of the expense of a war comes after the war is over, the veterans benefits, the restocking of weapons.
Absolutely. But I mean, just every day over $1 billion, every day over $1 billion. And again, first, if you want a war, you ought to be able to, we ought to live up to our constitutional responsibility and vote to authorize the use of military force. And if you want a war, then you can vote to spend how many billions of dollars you want to spend on that war. But we got a lot of places in this country where schools are crumbling, and they need investments. And local communities don't have the revenue to be able to rebuild schools. A lot of states are struggling. I mean, we just got to get our priorities straight. But I thank the chair for yielding, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Scott, Mr. Owens, for being here. I appreciate your testimony. Mr. Owens, a number of my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle have introduced bills to create national standards when it comes to building school facilities. So, think HVAC, for example, right? Sort of exacting standards to be applied nationally so that schools that are built in Utah are built the same way that they're built in Colorado, let's say, for example. I think, as you know, I represent Colorado in Congress. I presume you disagree with that.
Yes, I think the way it's set up, that's called federalism that you're talking about right now. And I don't.
School districts are best positioned to kind of decide how to build those buildings.
There are certain things, yes. Certain things, school buildings would be good. When it comes, let me just say, we talked about the war earlier. I think.
Wait, I'm not talking about war.
I just want to make a point that of all the things in terms of what we're going through right now on the local and federal sense is that we have a war against the family.
Mr. Owens, I'm going to, Mr. McGovern didn't, that was your exchange with Mr. McGovern. I'm not touching the war. So school building standards. What about teacher training standards? There are some efforts to essentially nationalize teacher training so that you'd have a uniform standard. Is that
federalized? That's federal. That should be a state issue also.
There should be a state issue. Okay. What about safety measures? There are a variety of different arguments.
There's some oversight, federal. There's certain things that should be done in terms of federal, but then a lot is focused on, again, at the local areas.
Got it. Okay. So basically what I'm getting at, I mean, at least it seems like it to me, you're a big local control guy, right?
What?
You're a big local control guy.
Yeah.
Just as you said, local control for building standards, right? Okay. Local control for teacher training standards, right? Correct?
Yep.
Okay. But forms for student nicknames, time to get the federal government involved. Sounds like that's a good assignment for federal government.
When parents are
Is that right?
No, not at all. When
Well, but
parents-
this is what
this is a parent issue. This is a parent,
Well,
this
no,
is a
no, but
state
I'm-
issue, and it comes down to a very simple thing.
Let's quote
If
the
in
bill.
case you're telling, if if you.
I
yes,
want to talk about
please,
the
yeah.
language, Madam Chair.
If,
It's
if
my
we're in a
time.
position where we have across this country,
Sure.
teachers who take themselves and put themselves in parental place, then it's time for federal to say enough. And we're not,
Help me understand. No, sir, I'm going to reclaim my time. What I am trying to get at is I understand there's different components to this bill. Okay? But one component of this bill, just to be crystal clear, I'm going to read it, quote it. A public school that receives funds under this bill, quote, shall obtain parental consent before changing a covered student's preferred name on any school form. That is the language of the bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, as I said, capital construction standards, in your view, a matter for local school districts. Teacher training standards, in your view, a matter for local school districts. But, and this is self-evident, changing a covered student's preferred name on any school form is a matter for the federal government, right?
It's a matter, well, when the right of the parent be told information, then there should be a federal
Federal
insight
standard.
with this. Yes.
Exactly. So that's what you're proposing. Okay. So help me understand. How many kids do you have, by the way?
I have 6.
6 kids. How old is your youngest?
My youngest is 31.
31. I am much earlier in the marathon of life. So I have 2 kids. My wife and I are blessed to have 2 children, a daughter who's 7 and a son who's 2. So he's not in secondary school quite yet. His name is Joshua. We named him after the book of Joshua. And, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's important.
Well, let me finish. Let me get where I'm
I
getting
want to
at.
make sure I can speak to this concept of federalism because it's important.
Well, we'll come back to that. Let me just work with me on this one because the reason why I'm talking about my children, where I'm asking about your children, is I like to evaluate these bills in the context of how they're going to work in practice, right? So I call my son Joshua. My wife likes to call Joshua Josh. That's his nickname. Under this bill, okay, very clear, plain language requires that in order for a school to be able to change a child's name, preferred name on a school form, they have to obtain consent. So if a teacher wanted to write my son's name down as Josh instead of Joshua, right, the school would be required to obtain parental consent. How would the school get consent? How does that happen?
First of all, there's
No. Answer that question.
okay.
Sir.
I'm going
how would
to.
the
I
school
think
get
we need to.
consent?
I think we need to kind of set the bar of what we're really talking about.
No,
okay?
but that's what I'm
And
asking is how would the school get consent? How would this? So just
the bill is simple. It says that no federal funds may be used to promote radical gender ideology.
But sir,
And
I
so
understand
to
that
go
part.
from Tim to Timothy is not radical gender ideology.
No, but that's not what this language
This
says.
does not violate federalism. On the contrary,
No,
Congress has a
sir.
responsibility to ensure that federal funds are
Mr.
being
Owens,
used responsibly.
I'm asking an honest question, okay? This is I'm quoting the language of your bill. I'm not making it up. I read it to you. It says, we're operating in the same place, shall obtain parental consent before changing a covered student's preferred name on any school form, okay? So I'm trying to help me understand.
Okay.
President Trump signs.
This will not be controversial.
Hold on. I didn't ask the question yet.
Okay.
President Trump signs this bill into law, okay? So now the teacher in the school district, right, has to obtain consent before changing Joshua's name to Josh on an official school form. All I'm asking you.
Not consent, just informing them.
No, it says here, obtain parental consent.
Well, when you come down to radical, and it goes from Josh to Joyce, then it's a whole different
That's
conversation.
not what the bill says. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know where you're getting this language. This is the statute you wrote.
Yes.
It says obtain parental consent.
I think the key here is understanding what the focus is and what the concerns of
That's
parents
not how
are.
the law works, Mr. Owens. It's not, you don't get to just impute your theories about how this will work in practice. Teachers across the country, you've decided to create a federal standard for every single
Teachers across
school
the
district.
country
Hold on, sir.
Are
Every
transitioning
single-
kids, your child,
Sir,
Josh, could be
every
switched in
school
district.
district in the country is going to have to abide by Burgess Owens' new standard when it comes to changing the preferred name on any school form, doesn't matter if it's in Utah, doesn't matter if it's in Colorado, okay? A field trip form, a lunch form, a student of the week form, every one of those is a school form. I'm simply asking you, in your world that you've constructed, how this will work. You say the school has to get consent. So does the teacher ask me? Does the teacher email me? Do they give me a phone call? Can I talk to the teacher when I'm picking up my kids from school? What happens if they tell one parent and not both parents? I'm just trying to like understand how this world is.
How would you, I guess the question I would have, if Josh.
I'm
went to
asking the
Joyce-
questions.
If Josh
You
went to
haven't
Joyce,
answered
would you
any
like,
of them, sir.
if Josh went to Joyce, would you like to figure out a
Oh
way
my
to make sure
God.
that's happening?
What I'm saying to you,
Would you be
is
concerned about
sir,
your son being turned into a little girl
what I'm
and
what-
not
what-
being informed?
what I'm
about that?
suggesting to you, respectfully, I hope that some of your colleagues watch this exchange before they vote tomorrow on the bill, because I understand, okay, the ideological, I don't agree with it. I understand the ideological arguments that are animating some of what you all are pursuing. But what I am telling you is that most parents in America, as a father of young children, okay, I am not spending all of my time worried about form regulation, about a teacher being able to ask me for permission to call my son by his nickname, okay? If you wanted to do what you're describing, then you all should have spent adequate time within the committee marking up a very specific bill. But of course, this is what happens when you try to create a national standard for school forms. And one would think that you would understand that, given that you are such a, by your own admission, proponent of local control, at least on everything except for school forms. So I mean, to me, this is nonsense, but that isn't inconsistent with the way this committee is approaching. No, we've had fair exchanges. I'm going to give Mr. Scott a chance, and then I'm going to yield back to the chair.
Yeah, I think we just, as you have pointed out, if you just read the words, you're absolutely right. Shall obtain parental consent before changing a covered student's preferred name on any school form. School form could be the roster, the
Correct.
school roster. So they're playing basketball. If they list them as
Correct.
Josh, they better get, however they get it, parental consent. Covered student, or if you turn the page, means A, an elementary school student, or B, a student in any of the
Correct.
middle grades.
Precisely.
That's all of them.
Yes.
So
correct.
Josh would clearly be a covered student. If they write if he's playing baseball, they put a little form, you got to get parental consent. It doesn't say both parents, it just
Correct.
says parental consent.
They don't define parental, they don't define consent, they don't define preferred name, they don't define form. It's all just, they're, constructed from their imagination.
And when my friend from Utah was answering, he was answering really section 3, trying to get back to the ideology.
Right.
You're getting into a specific part of the bill that says you got to get consent before the name goes on a form, whatever that means. Very simple question.
School forms, man, just fascinating. I never thought I'd spend so much. I spent a lot of time on school forms, as a parent with my wife, but I did not think it would come up in the Rules Committee, Madam Chair. Anyway, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse. I think, Mr. Owens, I didn't ask any questions or make any comments at the beginning, but I think what you're getting at, and what I believe the bill is getting at, is that the courts have consistently held parents have a right to know what their children are being taught or exposed to in school. And that what you're talking about is not whether we're going to call Joshua Josh, but whether or not the schools are aiding and abetting children in attempting to change their identity. And they can't change their gender.
Right.
That's not possible to do. However, young children can sometimes be a little confused, and there may be some trend going on in school, and everybody thinks it's cool to do a certain thing, and they want to change who they are, and that means changing their name. I think most of us understand what it is you're trying to accomplish here, that we're trying to protect the children from malign influences in the schools. And there are plenty of them out there. So I thank you very much for bringing the bill to us. And I know that this is something that is a major problem across the country, where we have people in schools who want to put themselves in the place of the parents and do the things that they think should be done. So I appreciate your bringing the bill to us, and I appreciate the committee and the leadership on the committee for bringing this forth. And I look forward to the Rules Committee allowing this bill to go to the floor.
Can I make one last comment here? I think what we have to understand is we're talking about the family unit. If you want to understand why it's such a dark place in our country, it's because we have people who are not parents taking the role of parents. And I would say to my colleague, the worst thing in his life would happen. His son Josh shows up and says, "My name is Joyce. I've already made the changes. I've decided I'm going to take some whatever." That would not be a very happy day in that household, because that's not what the parents would want to have happen for them.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Thank you, Mr. Scott. You're excused.
Everybody.
All right, good to see you. Thank you. How you doing? Good. Good to see you. Hi, how are you? Good. Are they calling us right now?
Yeah.
Absolutely, of course.
God bless Texas.
Hi.
Yes,
And now welcome our third panel, Chairman Arrington and Representative Escobar from the Budget Committee. Your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Arrington, I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're here today to stop the political nonsense and dangerous brinkmanship of our Democrat colleagues who for 72 days and 16 votes have held the Department of Homeland Security and the American people who depend on their services hostage over ridiculous and reckless demands that would effectively imperil not only the safety of our federal law enforcement agencies, but the American people, and would, as a result, defund ICE and CBP and revert back to the 4 years of lawlessness and chaos from the open border. Madam Chair, this is serious business. This isn't just about the inconvenience at airports or the extenuating circumstances under which we fund our federal government. This is an unprecedented and sustained national security and public safety threat, and it has to stop. And that's why we're here. Madam Chair, we're here because our ports need to be defended by our National Guardsmen from trafficking of people and drugs and protected from terrorist attacks like we saw in Austin, Texas, or the failed ISIS attacks in the heart of New York City, or what happened to the president and the cabinet members and all those at the Correspondents' Dinner. And we could go on and on. It is completely unacceptable to not fund the federal government and especially the Department of Homeland Security. CISA agents cannot defend our critical infrastructure against hostile hacks, and the list goes on. So without the support and collegiality and the good faith negotiations, because we did have an agreement with our House Democrats, Senate Republicans and Democrats to fund the government. Without that, we have to resort to a measure to do what
the American people again for 72 days, have been praying we would do and come to our senses and do the right thing. If it weren't for the president's intervention, Madam Chair, these poor folks at Homeland Security, the employees, the hardworking public servants would have gone without pay for 100 days. Next week, they're in a position, if we didn't act unilaterally as responsible leaders for our country, they would go without pay. Enough's enough. So we're going to do what I believe is the right thing, and we're going to fund our government, including those who protect us and risk their lives to enforce our immigration laws and to deport the criminal aliens who are in this country, putting our communities and our families at risk. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arrington. Ms. Escobar, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member McGovern. I'm here to voice my strong opposition to this budget resolution, both because of its outrageous spending allocations and because of my serious concerns with the process of how this was done. I think it's really important for everyone to understand what's happening in America today. Americans are struggling. The latest Gallup poll shows that nearly half of American adults, 47%, describe America's current economic conditions as poor. That's up from 40% a month ago. And it's clear why they feel this way. Republicans' so-called One Big Beautiful Bill slashed access to Medicare and nutrition assistance programs. Republicans refused to renew subsidies that helped Americans pay for their health insurance, causing their premiums to shoot up by 114%. Trump's tariffs have cost the average family more than $1,700 in 2025 alone. And now his war in Iran has made gas prices skyrocket, and prices are likely to get worse. Instead of focusing on how we stop this economic collapse, Republicans are demanding an additional $70 billion, potentially as high as $140 billion for CBP and ICE. The One Big Beautiful Bill, which provides tax breaks to billionaires by making drastic cuts to programs Americans depend on, also gave ICE and CBP $140 billion. This was for President Trump's mass deportation program, but that $140 billion could fund the entire Department of Homeland Security through next year. So why are we really here? In the wake of the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, Republicans are choosing to jam through additional funding.
Really quick, I just want to take a quick demographic of the chat. If you are a Republican, please press a 1 in the chat. If you are a Democrat, please press a 2 in the chat. If you are independent, please press 3 in the chat. Greatly appreciate it.
For ICE and CBP, instead of working with us to find bipartisan solutions that both protect our communities and ensure that ICE and CBP are just as accountable to the public as normal law enforcement agencies are. I have the privilege of sitting on both the House Budget Committee with my colleague and friend, Mr. Arrington. I also sit on the House Appropriations Committee. And this partisan approach to government funding is not the way we should do things. The original Homeland Security Appropriations Bill that passed out of the committee had protections for U.S. citizens against what we saw in Minneapolis and many other American cities. But Donald Trump and Stephen Miller stripped out those protections because they knew they could do this: use Republicans in Congress to jam through a bill that grossly inflates these agencies' budgets and also clears the way for a supplemental defense package that will fund the president's war in Iran, a war that has already cost us an estimated $50 billion. Let's be clear, Section 4108 of this bill sets the stage for a future supplemental defense funding package without us knowing what the actual cost of that will be. Just 2 weeks ago, during a hearing in the Budget Committee, I asked the OMB director, Mr. Vogt, if he could tell me how much would be requested in the Iran supplemental, and he either couldn't tell me or he wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't even ballpark it, as a matter of fact. We shouldn't be clearing the we shouldn't be clearing the way to fund Trump's war of choice, which has not only driven up the cost of everyday essentials, but more importantly, resulted in the death of 13 American service members. And frankly, I'm astonished to see my colleagues in the House rubber stamp this. This budget resolution will allow Senate Republicans to jam the House with little to no House consideration. By allowing the Senate to move on reconciliation first, that means the House will not be able to hold any committee markups and will instead have to eat whatever the Senate passed reconciliation bill includes. I'm going to be voting no on this rule, no on the concurrent resolution, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. We have an obligation to treat a matter as serious as increasing the deficit with the attention it deserves. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, in order to solve a problem, people have to want to solve the problem. And so I guess I know there were questions after what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when you had a governor and a mayor allowing riots and not allowing federal law enforcement to do their job. And obviously that was Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But Ms. Escobar, can you tell me why are you opposed to funding Customs and Border Protection?
I'm not, Mr. Scott, and I'm glad you asked.
You continue to vote against it.
I'm voting against a bill that refuses to acknowledge that we need some fundamental reforms. Plus, you have $140 billion available.
Your demand, though, the original discussions were around Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. Is that a fair statement?
Around ICE and CBP, yes.
No, it was never around CBP until the Democratic Party made it clear that they didn't intend to resolve the situation. And then they brought CBP into the equation and stripped the funding from CBP when they were originally stripping it from Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. I think both of them have to be funded. And unless somebody supports the open border policies of the Biden administration, then they would want both CBP and Immigration and Customs Enforcement open. So, Mr. Arrington, I want to go to you. Do we know how many people illegally came into the United States during the Biden administration?
Mr. Scott, suffice it to say, it was well over 10 million, and there were millions of gotaways that would be hard to enumerate, but it was millions of people, many of whom came through my home state of Texas.
And would you agree with me that before the House passed the Department of Homeland Security funding bill, that there was an agreement among Democrats and Republicans that
Yes.
for the bill to go through the House and the Senate and be signed into law?
Complete funding of everything, including ICE and CBP agreement from the four corners.
And there were agreements with regard to Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. There were going to be de-escalation training, body cameras. There were a lot of agreements in what was a bipartisan agreement that was a compromise.
That's correct.
And then once the piece of legislation got to the Senate, Democrats changed their demands, and now we've been here for how long?
72 days and counting.
72 days. And so now the only path forward where we fund, and again, Customs and Border Protection. Customs and Border Protection does a lot of valuable stuff at the border, but they also do a tremendous amount of work with regard to customs. I mean, the Atlanta airport, I've seen our CBP operations right there. I mean, the hound dogs that they run through those airports to make sure that they pick up substances coming into the country that we don't want to contaminate our food supply. I mean, we have to have Customs and Border Protection. And I guess when the Democrats added CBP to the demands, that was when I knew that the only path forward was going to be the reconciliation package. That was the proof that they never intended to get a resolution. So, I mean, I've got about a minute left. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Arrington. I appreciate you being the honest broker in this and understanding that things have to be done and that Immigrations and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection have to be funded.
Mr. Scott, to your earlier point, no amount of quote reforms will resolve the root issue, which is the lack of coordination at the local and state level. We've had far more people apprehended and deported in Texas, in cities like Dallas, in cities like Phoenix, Atlanta, far more, and we didn't have the problems we had in Minnesota. We have made improvements. We've agreed on some common sense fixes, but what they characterize as reforms is an outright obstruction and backdoor defunding of ICE and CBP, which would go back to the chaos and crime that would threaten the safety of our citizens.
My time has approached the end. I want to say this. I saw one of my sheriffs the other day in Georgia, and in rural Georgia, they have stopped multiple Iranians, multiple vehicle stops, all of which had hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash wrapped the exact same way, because we have I-75 and that I-75 corridor. And so I want to say this, I'm thankful for all of our law enforcement officers out there, all of them. They do yeoman's work to protect us. And we have no idea who is in this country right now because of what happened under the Biden administration. And we need to be more aggressive with making sure that when we stop somebody from a country like Iran that's got hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, that we know exactly where they got it, exactly where they were taking it, exactly who they've been in touch with, and we need to put them in jail until we deport them. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, I don't even know where to begin, to be honest with you. I mean, first of all, let's just tell the truth to people that ICE and CBP already have funds. In the big ugly bill, ICE received $74.9 billion. They have $63.2 billion remaining. CBP, they got $64.7 billion. They have over $40 billion that remains. So this idea that they're not funded, I don't even know where the hell that's coming from. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. That's just not the truth. And yeah, people are a little bit upset on our side when federal law enforcement agencies murder people. Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse at the VA, was killed by CBP agents. And so, yeah, we want some reforms. And wanting reforms and also wanting to catch the bad guys, are not inconsistent. And when the chairman of the Budget Committee says that enough is enough, I mean, I agree. The Senate, by the way, in a unanimous way, sent over to us twice a bill to fund everything but ICE and CBP. If you're worried about funding, FEMA and all those other agencies, just take what the Senate wants and let's work out the other stuff. But you guys can't do that. You're incapable of doing anything but embracing the extreme. And as a result, nothing's getting done. I mean, when Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders agree, boy, I mean, I don't know, maybe we should take a look at that and figure out a way to move that forward. So, I mean, this whole debate is not based on reality here in this committee. Chairman Arrington, so this new budget resolution starts a process to provide up to $140 billion for ICE and CBP, again, who have murdered U.S. citizens. Do you agree that that is the best use of up to $140 billion right now on ICE, which has already been funded at record-breaking levels for years by Republicans and the big ugly bill. Do you think that that's the best use of $140 billion at this moment in time?
To be honest with you, after 4 years of a deluge of illegals and crime and human trafficking for 4 years, unprecedented numbers as record.
Yes.
What the answer is,
Yeah.
I'm not so sure we don't need more to clean up the mess first.
So ICE has.
But this is just operating.
ICE has 63.2 billion remaining from the big ugly bill. Mr. Chairman, Republicans' first reconciliation bill made the largest healthcare cut in U.S. history, gutting Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by more than $1 trillion, which helped cover the cost of even more tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefit the rich. Now Republicans want their second reconciliation bill to provide up to $140 billion for ICE and CBP. Would this bill do anything to help Americans who are facing higher healthcare costs right now?
Mr. McGovern, the big beautiful bill protected the safety nets for the vulnerable American citizens who depend on them. And I'm proud of that work.
You missed the hearing on the Farm Bill right beforehand. No, it didn't. But the answer, I guess, is no. I mean, on SNAP, which is something I care deeply about, the bill also included the largest cuts to SNAP in the history of the program, all while food costs are now rising alongside other basic needs. New data released from Trump's own USDA shows that 3 million Americans have already been kicked off of SNAP. Does this budget do anything to help make food more affordable for people, whether on SNAP or off SNAP?
Well, the first reconciliation bill actually has brought inflation down, has brought interest down. This bill. So the first bill is to extinguish the firestorm of the 22% price increase under Democrat leadership. This bill simply protects the American people from the crime and criminals that have overwhelmed the system.
ICE and CBP already have funding, so I don't know what you're talking about.
May I answer that?
But the president's illegal and misguided war in Iran, for example, has caused the price of gas to skyrocket. Today's average is $4.11 across the country. Does this budget do anything to lower the gas prices for everyday Americans?
This budget protects American people against the Democrat shutdown.
So I guess that's no, right? All right. So I say that because I mean I don't know whether you guys do town halls or not, or whether you talk to your constituents. But on my flight from Boston to Washington today, I had two people stop me to talk about the price of gas. I had another person stop me to tell me what the hell is wrong with Washington. You know, when you guys are not addressing any of the issues around affordability. Ms. Escobar, does this Republican budget resolution comply with the requirements of the House rules? And I'm specifically concerned that it appears to violate Clause 7 of Rule 21, which states that the House cannot consider a budget resolution containing reconciliation instructions that would cause an increase in direct spending.
You are correct. This violates that rule. What we've seen Republicans do with their reconciliation bills is blow up our deficit and grow the national debt. This does that as well.
Chairman Arrington, do you agree that this measure violates House rules?
No, I don't.
Then how are you going to pay for all this spending?
Well, let me correct the record because CBO, nonpartisan arbiter of the numbers, had for the first 6 months of this fiscal year, the deficit going down by $138 billion. That's the first time in about a decade. So even the CBO says that through growth, through controlling spending, and through tariff revenue, we've actually brought the deficit down, which is the tax on our children. Once again, very proud of the work that we did.
So again, I mean, the rule, which states that the House cannot consider a budget resolution containing reconciliation instructions that would cause an increase in direct spending. You just outlined, and you're opening a whole bunch of new spending that we have to do, not just on ICE and CBP, but a whole bunch of other stuff.
It's a fair question.
By the way, you mentioned $138 billion, which I doubt that that's what's going to happen, but that's still short of what you're spending on ICE and CBP. Ms. Escobar?
And to add to that, that not only does this violate the rule, not only does this grow the deficit, but our economy is in trouble. Budgets are a representation of our values. The American people need our help. They need our support. But what this funding budget does is not just add to an already historic amount of spending for CBP and ICE. Not only does it grow the deficit and the national debt, it doesn't acknowledge the reality, which is inflation is going up, joblessness is going up, gas is going up, groceries are going up. What are we doing here?
I agree. We can't even have an honest conversation in this committee anymore about the realities that we're faced with. I mean, Mr. Arrington, you're the chair of the House Budget Committee. You're supposed to care about the budget process and not violate these rules to give more handouts to agencies that don't need them. You know, when President Biden was still in office, you said, and I quote, "A debt crisis looms large over the horizon, and if we fail to confront it, our nation will reap the disastrous and irreparable consequences associated with it."
Yes.
End quote. Those are your words.
Yes, sir.
But here are the facts. When President Trump took office, the national debt was a little over $36 trillion. Now it's $39 trillion. In just a little over 1 year, a Republican-controlled government has overseen a $3 trillion increase in the national debt. Annual interest payments on the debt are projected to surpass $1 trillion per year this year. That's more than we currently spend on defense, and it's just going to get worse. Last year, you came in here to defend the Republicans' big ugly bill, which the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office now says will add nearly $5 trillion more to the debt over the next decade. And now you want to add tens of billions more dollars to the debt to the debt and handouts to ICE and CBP, who you already gave tens of billions of dollars to in the big ugly bill. I mean, you're in charge of the Budget Committee. You're supposedly the man who cares deeply about reining in the debt. How can you possibly justify having already added nearly $3 trillion to the national debt since you guys took power last year? That's $180 billion a month. And then come here and defend a plan that will increase our budget debt even more with this new budget. You can only blame Joe Biden so many times. But a lot of this spending is stuff that you all were for and you put forward. So, I mean, I just find this whole process just lacking in integrity. I don't know what the hell we're doing here, but, you know, I think maybe that's the reason why your poll numbers are so lousy, because people want you to address issues that actually impact affordability.
Okay, for really quick, to everyone in the chat, please do me a huge favor. Please do not use any words that is against YouTube's terms of service, such as this comment right here. Robert, he says, back up now, your kid sniffing P, that P word. Please do not use that P word in the chat. It is greatly appreciated. Please find a different way to utilize a definition of that word without using the actual word. Thank you.
In their daily life, and they want to get spending under control, not by spending more on rogue agencies, but on spending money on things that will help them. So I thank you both for being here. I don't know if you want to respond, but
I'd love to. Yes, sir. So the tax liability for working Americans have been cut, extended, and then cut further so they could afford what was about $1,700 increase because of the regressive tax of inflation.
Life is more affordable for people today.
Without a doubt, if I may, without a doubt, and according to just the numbers, not my commentary or your subjective commentary, but the average inflation rate was in the last year was 3.3 under Biden. It's been 2.7 under this president.
Groceries are more affordable today than they were a year ago.
After a 35% increase in food under the Joe Biden and Democrat leadership, absolutely.
Don't come to my town halls. You'll get booed off the stage.
I would love to join you. I'd love to join you.
I don't know how you can say that with a straight face to people in this country.
Because the numbers don't lie.
Well,
politicians lie. The numbers don't.
Go to a supermarket right now. Look at the.
I'm not saying it's not still a struggle, but after 4 years
the price of rent,
50-year high inflation, Mr. McGovern, it's going to take a.
I disagree.
Okay.
Mr. Jack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chairman Arrington, for testifying. Could you help frame for this committee as we deliberate whether to pass this rule out of committee, what this vote represents on the House floor should we vote on it later this week? A vote for it is doing this, and a vote against it is doing that.
A vote for this budget resolution with reconciliation instructions would fund ICE and CBP at the operational budget that they currently have and extend it for 3 years because we want to prevent being in this situation again and having a 72-day or worse shutdown. This is the worst or longest shutdown, second to only the last shutdown, and we want to try to avoid that while resourcing an important public safety operation within the federal government.
A vote against it would be what?
A vote against it would cause everyone at the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, the CISA for infrastructure security, our Coast Guardsmen, TSA agents, and ICE and CBP would all get a pay cut. They'd all lose a paycheck, and they continue under this chaos. Over 800 TSA employees, Mr. Jack, have walked out, never to return again. So I don't think we can sustain this and ask Secretary Mullen to lead an agency that's so important to the public safety and security of this country and do it where it's functional. I think we're at that breaking point. So to not vote for this would be to essentially defund ICE and CBP, but it would also go back to a shutdown where nobody gets paid.
Well, that's the framing that I not only agree with, but as I understand it, and you can correct me if wrong, I've seen public reporting that Secretary Mullen may not be able to use the extraordinary circumstances that he has to pay our TSA workers and everybody else at the end of this month. So I think the urgency is near. I appreciate your testimony. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. So we're here to start the process for the Republicans' second reconciliation bill following the big ugly bill that they managed to ram through last summer. And the stated reason for this one is that DHS hasn't been funded for over 2 months. But that's only because the Speaker has refused to allow a vote on a Senate bill that would fund much of DHS, and it's refused to negotiate reforms to ICE and Border Patrol, which are the sticking point after armed and masked agents from those agencies shot and killed American citizens on American city streets. So, Republicans are trying to provide ICE and Border Patrol with an additional $140 billion in this bill after they already gave ICE and CBP $140 billion last year. So that's nearly 300 billion taxpayer dollars squandered on Stephen Miller's mass deportation fever dreams, while Americans are struggling with inflation and healthcare and housing are unaffordable and gas is pushing $5 a gallon. So this reconciliation bill seems to make clear where Republicans' priorities lie. Americans are just going to have to make do, but ICE gets another blank check. Hundreds of billions for masked thugs and massive detention centers that nobody wants in their neighborhood, and nothing for working families. Republicans are hoping that everyone has forgotten the killings of American citizens, the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, who died when ICE and Border Patrol deployed hundreds of rogue masked agents, federal agents, to terrorize the people of Minneapolis with orders to confront peaceful protesters who were exercising their First Amendment rights. Rather than investigating how such abuses could be perpetuated by the U.S. government, this administration and their House allies have tried to brand Preddy and Good and their families as terrorists and have fought every effort to rein in ICE. Democrats have demanded simple reforms to ICE and CBP that the majority of Americans support to keep masked thugs off our streets and prevent these types of killings from ever happening again. We've presented Republicans with a series of proposals, legislative text, and a half dozen opportunities to fund the rest of DHS while we find a solution to the problems with ICE and CBP. Opportunities that the Senate, all 100 senators, unanimously embraced, Democrats and Republicans alike. We gave Republicans every opportunity to negotiate in good faith, to fund these agencies responsibly, to prevent the kinds of harms and harassment that everyone has seen on TV, on social media, and that has been deployed to terrorize rather than protect our communities. But instead of engaging in that discussion or any discussion, House Republicans have said no and are now proceeding with their plan to fund ICE and CBP for the rest of Trump's second term. This is a whole lot of money that could and should be used to solve the problems facing Americans. It's money that could be used to build new affordable homes. It's money that could be used to address healthcare costs, fund our schools, and even reduce the deficit. So it's a shameful waste of our nation's wealth. And I just want to dig into some of the mischaracterizations that we've just heard here. We've heard our colleagues try to frame the failure to fund DHS for over 2 months as Democrats changing their mind when the bill was sent to the Senate. But isn't it true, Ms. Escobar, that what happened in that timeframe, the context was that 2 American citizens were shot and killed by federal agents? Can you speak to that?
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. You are absolutely right. I will tell you, there's been a lot of work that Democrats and Republicans have put into trying to adequately fund our government. But yes, Americans were shocked when they saw what unfolded before our very own eyes, the shooting of a mother, the shooting and killing of an ICU nurse, and then to have the administration and the Department of Homeland Security lie to us and tell us not to believe what we saw. If we can't even agree to a fundamental truth, that makes fixing the problem even harder. We can fix this. We can come to a compromise, but we've got to work together in order to do that. This reconciliation bill goes completely around any compromise, any good faith effort. And to your point, we still have money in the from the first reconciliation bill. So there's still money for CBP and ICE in that first bill. But now Republicans want even more, another $140 billion, all while Americans are struggling. It just doesn't make sense.
I also just wanted to clarify, we just heard that somehow it was not appropriate to want to address problems with Customs and Border Patrol in these very aggressive immigration enforcement measures. Isn't it true that a Customs and Border Patrol commander, Greg Bovino, led the lawless behavior in?
To Jim in the chat, Jim says, as far as I can remember, Clinton was the only one that had a balanced budget. Maybe we should follow his budget. I don't think you want to do that. Clinton messed up the housing market. He really destroyed the economy with that housing market deal that he did.
Los Angeles and Chicago and Minneapolis.
That's right. Under his direction, we saw a lot of the horrifying images across the country. And Alex Preddy was murdered, shot, and killed by a Border Patrol agent. So it is, of course, incumbent on all of us to work together and come up with some pretty, I think, common sense reforms. We just want the same accountability for these law enforcement agencies that every other law enforcement agency has.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really been so truly shocking is just the putting people in danger, both agents and citizens and people on the street in danger because of completely lawless behavior. Certainly, I was in Chicago for hearings on these issues when Mr. Bovino and his troops have been ordered not to lob tear gas at protesters unless certain conditions were met. He went out the next day and did it and then lied to the court and was cited for lying to the court about it. Let me turn to the issues that probably more directly concern the American people and that they're talking to me in our town halls about, I suspect in your town halls. I'm really concerned about the cost of living crisis facing the country. I mean, we've seen statistics that in March, inflation measured 3.3%. That's the largest single month increase since April of 2021. We've seen that gas prices increased 21.2% last month in March, the largest month over month increase since we started measuring that in 1967. The average gas prices are over $4 a gallon for weeks, which is almost $1 higher than average prices a year ago. Tariffs in the last year have cost families about $1,750 per family. Beef is up 16%, coffee's up 22%. How does this reconciliation bill help with all of these costs that American families are dealing with?
It does absolutely nothing to help Americans as they struggle under this economy. And just like you, my town hall meetings, I'm hearing about what Americans are struggling with, and they're asking for help. It seems like there's always plenty of money for war. There's plenty of money for Republicans' priorities. We need to turn our focus to Americans' priorities, which is they need help, and their health insurance has skyrocketed. Everything you've identified, I hear about routinely in my town hall meetings. This bill does nothing to address that.
It's not just the town hall meetings. I was filling my car for the trip back to DC, and the guy next to me with the pickup truck was freaking out that it cost him over $80 to fill up his truck today. So thank you for your testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Roy, do you have any questions?
So I thank the chairwoman. I just have a few, Mr. Chairman, and I missed the early part of your testimony, but I know you well. I think one thing that I want to point out that I know I'm sure my colleagues have pointed out, and see if the chairman agrees, that we're here. I mean, obviously the budget resolution has a number of factors in it that's come from the Senate dealing with defense and other issues. But we're here, and everybody understands why we're here, is very simply to ensure that ICE and Border Patrol can do their job.
Yes.
Is that fair?
100%.
And so whatever concerns anyone has with the legislation on, frankly, in either party, either side of the aisle, for whatever reason, the reason that this bill exists is precisely and specifically because our Democrat colleagues have refused to fund ICE and Border Patrol.
For 72 days.
And in doing so, they've also put at risk the funding for the rest of the Department of Homeland Security. Correct? So we've had to move money around in order to fund these other law enforcement agencies, including Secret Service, which obviously we had to deal with this weekend, Coast Guard, TSA. We had issues at airports. We've had to deal with that because our Democrat colleagues have refused to fund Homeland Security. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
And so I think that is the backdrop that matters a lot here, because I hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle complaining about, oh, we're not funding the appropriations bill that would fund the rest of DHS. Somehow that's our fault. And the fact is that some of us said, whoa, hold on. We're not going to, hop to whatever you're telling us to do on appropriations. When you refuse to fund ICE and Border Patrol, we're going to say, let's make sure ICE and Border Patrol are getting funded, and then we'll manage and figure out how we can manage appropriations, which we should be doing collectively, but Democrats refuse to do. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And so now we've got this situation where this bill is before us, which, and I'll get to my concerns about it in a second, has concerns on people on both sides of the aisle, but because of the box Democrats have put us in, because none of us want to leave ICE and Border Patrol unable to carry out their job. At least none of us on our side of the aisle. Fair?
Correct.
So now that I'm going to lead into my question, which is I'm trying to balance that and our need to ensure that ICE and Border Patrol gets funded with other certain realities that I know are a concern for other members of the conference, right? The Rules Committee has to kind of figure this out and like what we're balancing in the interest of the conference, what amendments get made in order and everything else. And so the concerns I'm trying to balance, and I wonder if the chairman has perspective on, is it just kind of level setting. Right now, if one wanted to deal with, for example, something that Senator Hawley's been raising about dealing with transgender issues and abortion funding that we dealt with in the big, beautiful bill, that will not be dealt with in this bill and would require a third reconciliation process, correct?
That's correct.
Notwithstanding the fact that the gentleman who's complaining about it actually voted for the very bill that he's asking the House to change. I would just note, with all due respect to my friends in the Senate that always like the House to save their bacon. Then I would say, okay, there's that issue. Then there's this issue, which is, does this bill, does this budget and instructions, does it allow us, as it's written, to keep DHS funding together? Or does this continue to embrace the idea of isolating ICE and Border Patrol? In other words, is it structured to have DHS funded as one entity, either in reconciliation or appropriations, or is it?
We attempted to do a one entity funding construct, was rejected by the Democrats, sent over from the Senate to the House with all of Homeland but ICE and CBP, both agencies defunded. And so we have resorted to bifurcating it just so that we don't persist without having resourcing for enforcing immigration laws.
So will that result in, for example, September 30th of 2029, if we were to fund this through the 3 fiscal years into the next
That's correct.
term, would that not result in a situation that if the appropriations bills continue to be funded as they are, say in a CR type format, without ICE and Border Patrol, that if you hit a point at which you don't have the reconciliation package funding, you're going to be at a place where ICE and Border Patrol are left unfunded in the situation of a continuing resolution in the fall of 2029?
That's correct.
That's a risk of this approach. An approach that I've tried to lay the foundation is a reaction to our Democratic colleagues refusing to fund ICE and Border
Yes.
Patrol. Look, I lay all that out just to say, and I wanted to level set where we are, just because I remain torn about how to handle all of this. There are a number of things that I'm concerned about, a lot of presumptions being made about a third reconciliation package, issues we're not addressing or dealing with, that we need to address in another reconciliation package, but all built on a background of Democrats refusing to do the basic duty of government, which is to secure the United States.
That's right.
And so here we sit and we're trying to figure out how to manage that. But with that, I appreciate the chairman and I yield back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other persons here to ask any questions, our witnesses are excused.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I now welcome half of our fourth panel. Mr. Kelly from the Select Committee on Intelligence and Ms. Scanlon from the Judiciary Committee. Mr. Kelly, you are recognized for your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox. Ranking Member McGovern. Yeah, okay. Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member McGovern, members of the Rules Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I'm here to fill in for the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford, who is dealing with that unexpected flight delay, something all of us understand. I'm pleased to join the Judiciary Chairman, Mr. Jordan, to speak in favor of the underlying legislation to reform and reauthorize Section 702. As a member of the House Intelligence Committee, I have seen firsthand that Section 702 is one of our country's most important foreign intelligence authorities. FISA 702 is collection on foreign nationals based overseas who are likely to provide foreign intelligence value. These are terrorists, hackers, and spies living abroad.